Once upon a time, in a vast empire, there lived a young family. They had a little daughter, Lilith. Every time Enoch Rubenstein held his little girl, all he saw was a tiny angel. The moment she was born, he realized she looked just like him, like 2 drops of water. Her beauty was undeniable, but Enoch couldn't shake the doubt. Would she even recognize him as her dad? She's his blood and bone, and he gives her a love she'll never forget. Yet at the same time, he felt this strange unease, like something inside him was ripping apart. Like most of the Empire's aristocrats, Enoch's child was born to carry on the family legacy. So Enoch told himself he wouldn't feel anything until he saw the child with his own blood in her veins. He knew she'd grow up to be someone extraordinary, a true aristocrat. But if he wasn't careful, she could end up as the Empire's pawn. And looking at her sweet little face, Enoch vowed he wouldn't let that happen. One night, after finally making up his mind, Enoch took his baby and slipped out of the castle in secret. She gazed up at him with those big blue eyes, smiling, totally clueless about what was happening. But Enoch had a plan in motion. Before heading out, he gently kissed her rosy cheeks. Stepping out of the main building, where everything screamed of war, Enoch clutched Lilith close and braced himself to defy fate. He wouldn't let his daughter suffer the same brutal life on the battlefield that he did. After taking a few steps, Enoch heard his wife Selene's voice. She thought he was running out on her. He stopped but said nothing. She noticed the child in his arms and got furious. Then she started scolding him for just up and taking their daughter with him. Enoch explained he didn't want her to go through the same upbringing he did. He had to move forward. But Selene claimed it's her daughter too, so he didn't have the right to just snatch her away. Turning back to his wife, Enoch suggested they run off together. She just laughed. His words sounded completely absurd to her. She noted he was more impulsive than he seemed. Besides, they were free people, born imperial nobility. No sense running from anything. But most importantly, they had a duty to live and die for the Empire. Their daughter, too. Though she understood his feelings, she'd thought long and hard about her daughter's future. Enoch gritted his teeth, ready to do whatever it took to save his kid. Just then, Selene told him to leave. Then she turned and walked the other way. Before she went, Enoch confessed he was heading to Zenon. Someone was waiting there. Selene wished him luck. Then he was off with the baby. That day, the Empire's only holy blade, Enoch Rubenstein, vanished. From that day on, 7 years passed, and the story continued in a small village house. Lilith had grown up, and her dad was always by her side, coming to wake her for breakfast every morning. But she didn't want to get up, so with her eyes still closed, she begged for 5 more minutes to finish her dream. Her dad kept pushing, though. He had a friendly face and gentle hands. His name was James Brown. After convincing Lilith to wake up, he told her he'd made her a princess breakfast, fries and sausage. Her eyes still half shut, she sniffed the air and caught the smell of broccoli hiding under the eggs. She scrunched up her face and reminded him she hated broccoli, but James argued it was necessary. For dessert, he promised her almond chocolate cookies with apple jam. Lilith was little, but she knew her dad was trying to trick her into eating broccoli with the promise of sweets. She didn't think she'd fall for that old trick, though, so she demanded 2 cookies. Her dad was thrilled she'd get her vitamins and kissed her cheek. Alongside her daily life, the 7-year-old slowly started recalling her past life. Even though she was just a normal kid living with her 9th-level single dad. And no matter what, Lilith thought they were living in happy, peaceful times. Memories of her past life started floating back when she was just 3, and by 7, she remembered everything. The world she stepped into is the same one from the novel she read in her past life. Back then, she wasn't happy being a grad student because she thought it was beneath her. And at just 25, she died from burnout while writing her thesis. Her thesis was about the novel Doss's Rebellion, and the stress of writing it dragged her straight into the story. Now, with these memories, her old life as Lilith feels distant and fake, like a made-up fairy tale. By 7, she already thought like an adult, even though her kid-like hatred of broccoli still bugged her. When her dad did her hair, he'd baby her like she was a toddler, suggesting fancy styles, but she just wanted a ponytail. For some reason, she was shorter than the 5-year-old neighbor boy, but her dad didn't think it was a problem. She had the brain of an adult but kept it hidden, acting like a kid and asking for bunny ear braids. That always made her dad go soft, smooching her pink, squishy cheeks, which she secretly hated. Her dad still loved her, and after styling her hair, he got ready to hit the market, leaving Lilith with Aunt Susan. He couldn't bring her because scary soldiers were patrolling nearby. The girl insisted she was tough enough and not scared, but James wouldn't budge, saying it was too risky. Those elite soldiers came to the village on the Emperor's orders to hunt down knights in training. In the novel, humans were split into 2 kinds, those who could use magic and fight, and those who couldn't. Magic users had the perks, noble titles and all, that came with the imperial system's whole mage valuation setup. But during wars, they'd get thrown into battles and often die gloriously as heroes. The story didn't give a second glance to the ones who sucked at magic, like Lilith and her pops. But here they were, just chillin' through life. Lilith even thought it was the best break ever that she messed up at magic. Because let's face it, this world's nuts, and she was stoked to live it out with her old man without any drama. For a second, Lilith's little rant had James reconsidering. But hey, he wasn't losing sleep over it. So long as Lilith was happy, that was all that mattered to him. Before heading out, he asked Aunt Susan to keep an eye on Lilith while he was away and promised to be back in no time. Their bearded, red-haired neighbor dropped by, still not believing how a young guy like James had rolled into their backwoods. Susan told how one night he showed up at their door, cradling baby Lilith in his arms. He swore the kid wasn't sick but wouldn't touch a bottle. Just cried her eyes out. Susan saw how rough it must have been for the little one and let them in for a checkup. She whipped up some apple milk puree for the baby and handed the bottle to James to feed her. The kid was 5 months old, and her crying clearly told her dad. Milk just wasn't cutting it. The next day, James thanked Susan, and from then on, dropped by every day to lend a hand. Susan knows raising a kid alone is tough, but that young guy's learned a lot. The woman's story got cut off by a red-bearded man who whooped about winning the card game this time. He'd hit a straight flush and cackled with that raspy voice, laughing like a little kid. He was about to grab all the nuts as the stake, but Lilith told him to hold on and laid out her cards. She had a royal flush, and the bearded man had to admit he actually lost this time. After that, Lilith was about to start laundry, saying she could handle it when her aunt offered to take it. But the girl wanted to do something, so Dad'd be surprised when he came back. The aunt praised her effort, but asked her to at least help carry the basket to the river. But Lilith refused. Dad's laundry, she said, and grabbed the basket, stomping off to the river with her tiny legs. James didn't like that his daughter was sneaking in laundry without him, but she planned to keep it up. She'd been an orphan in her past life, and this man had cared for her faithfully. She saw him as everything. Because of that, Lilith wanted to grow up fast to help her daddy with everything. She loved that quiet, peaceful life so much. The girl wanted it to never end. She decided to savor her happiness until the world was at peace. And until then, just be happy. She often compared this life to her past, and the way things were now suited her a lot better. Lilith was doing laundry when she suddenly heard hoofbeats, then spotted riders approaching. She didn't get why they were here, and before she could react, one of them cast his shadow over her. She caught sight of their imperial crest. So they were imperial soldiers, the Blue Knights. They're the second-ranked knight class, and the one towering over her barked in order to grab her. His eyes narrowed like he'd finally cornered a long-hunted enemy. The girl nervously stared at his blue cloak, knowing she should run, but she was still too little. She wouldn't have made it. The man yanked her by the collar and slammed a rod against her. It lit up instantly. The glow told the knight this girl had a gift, and she was actually Enoch Rubenstein's daughter. He could tell just by looking. And when Lilith heard about the gift, she started thinking something was wrong. She squirmed and demanded to be let go, claiming she'd never heard of Enoch Rubenstein. Truth was, she remembered the name clearly, but didn't get why it was coming up now. In the novel, he was the commander of some knight order, the most powerful military force, a brilliant mage and swordmaster, but he lost his daughter to the imperial family and killed them all in a single day. Back then, he took in and raised another male character, Jesse, who became one of the two main heroes. Now Lilith wondered if everything was happening before the original events, and his daughter was probably still alive. She didn't care how this would affect her, but started claiming the Blue Knight totally misunderstood. Then she faked a spinning head, saying she'd start bleeding from the nose if he didn't put her down. She caught a glimpse of his black hair and blue eyes. Someone in the novel looked similar, but she couldn't remember who. All she knew was that she was in deep trouble, but she decided to confirm if they meant the silver-haired Duke. Lilith declared she only resembled him because of her hair and blue eyes. Her dad was James Brown, and she took after her mom. The knight still holding the girl noticed she was incredibly smart. Then he called her by name, and the girl faltered, confused how this guy knew her name. But then she spotted James's dad suddenly appearing in the glade. He held a stick and started demanding answers, and for them to release his daughter immediately. The girl panicked. Talking like that to these people could get her executed, and he threatened to kill them. She immediately apologized to the knight, saying her dad had lost his head and begged him to be lenient. He was just an Empire citizen barely getting by, collecting wood with his little daughter. The Blue Knight ignored her and just tossed her to another knight like some object. But Lilith didn't care about herself. She started screaming they shouldn't do anything to her dad. The Blue Knight dismounted and approached James Brown, who kept demanding they explain why they wanted his daughter. The knight called James Enoch and added that the emperor ordered him to return to the order right now and fulfill his duty. Lilith kept objecting. Her dad's name was James, not Enoch. His words fell on deaf ears again. The knight reminded her 7 years had already passed. It was time to wrap this up. Deserters under military law get executed on the spot. They're criminals. But the emperor's been lenient, keeping Enoch in a high rank because of his past contributions and abilities. No arrest orders were issued, no assets taken. All his rule-breaking got overlooked. They waited for him to come back. Now it's time. Then the knight repeated the emperor's order. Enoch had to return to the order and fulfill his duty, starting today. He stared at James with intense eyes, trying to drill the command into him. But James stood still, face unreadable, a faint smirk tugging his lips. He declared the emperor's words were still empty threats, past and present. Hearing this, Lilith panicked harder. Her dad had just crossed the line by insulting the imperial family. She scrambled to figure out how to stop her dad and run before something terrible happened, and bit the knight holding her. Taken by surprise, he let go. She hit the ground like a sack of potatoes. Ignoring the bruise, she sprang up and sprinted toward her dad. She didn't even get a chance to reach her goal because they grabbed her by the scruff of the neck again, mid-stride. Like a kitten. The knight captain had her by the collar, but she still kicked her legs and shouted at her dad to stay put. Then she turned to the knight and started begging for forgiveness over her dad's behavior. Her face looked sincere, and she pleaded for them to spare her dad's life. She insisted the knight was mistaken because of her hair color, even agreed to cooperate with them to prove he was wrong. She also promised to check everything, thinking Enoch was hiding somewhere and she could help find him. Only if they let her dad James go would Lilith agree to go with these people. The knight captain hesitated for a second, but the girl's plea didn't faze him. Tightening his grip so she couldn't slip away, he raised his sword at James, who suddenly got wrapped in magical energy. Lilith was terrified for her dad, not knowing what was going on. But it was James himself casting the magic. And in the next instant, the girl couldn't believe her eyes when she saw the strange transformation. Her dad was transforming into someone else. Silver hair, blue eyes. Lilith didn't get what was going on. She always thought her single dad was just James Brown. The knight captain handed her off to an assistant, ordering them to keep her safe. Lilith finally realized her dad was the powerful guy they'd been asking her about. The knight holding her is just following orders, and she immediately apologized, explaining she just found out. At that moment, she was bathed in bright light radiating from the mage's magical energy. Enoch braced for a fight with the knight captain and kept ranting about the emperor. He thought it was funny to execute anyone who defied the orders. He was curious how the Blue Knight would force him to obey. What really set him off was the knight daring to touch his daughter, so now he was ready to make him pay. But the knight captain wasn't about to let Rubenstein go. His second pressed a sword to the girl's neck and ordered Enoch to stop, demanded he surrender and follow them, or his daughter would get hurt. But that was a fatal mistake. Rubenstein exploded. How dare the so-called Holy Knight Order threaten his little girl? The captain insisted they were just following orders and had to bring Enoch back no matter what. But Enoch told him to pass along that he'd rejected that name and wouldn't take orders from the imperial family anymore. The knight argued Enoch had no choice now. It wasn't a request, it was an order. His second backed him up, saying if Enoch wanted his daughter safe, he had to give up. The terrified girl didn't know how to help her father now, but begged him to wait and hear her out. She was thinking how her seemingly normal dad is actually the main character, Enoch Ruben. He lost his little girl young and forged a blood blade of vengeance. But now, the moment's come with his daughter. Lilith wanted to go back to her carefree life, but now she's got no choice. Only one way out. She begged him to follow orders. She even swore to the knights her dad would come back to the order today, as long as they didn't touch him. They let them go. At home, she started screaming again that she's just a copy of her mom. She's still trying to wrap her head around it, badgering her dad why he never told her anything. He apologized, but even with 10 mouths, he couldn't have told her. Too dangerous. He's curious how she figured it out so quick in that situation. Saved them some time. Enoch figures those fools actually bought the act and let the hostage go. Now's the chance to pack up and split while the knights are waiting outside, none the wiser. But Lilith's got other plans. They're not running. They're heading back to the capital, and her dad's getting his knight title back. He's confused why she's saying that. She's got her reasons, wants to live with pride. She also wants to tag along to the capital, hit the academy, and get her gifted mark. Enoch's baffled. How does she know about the academy and all that? She says she heard it from her uncle. Her dad's furious. What was that old grouch thinking, telling a kid that? Then he locked eyes with his daughter and told him to listen up. He knew this day would come, and the scary guys waiting outside the door would find him. Enoch knew it, but still ran away because he didn't want his daughter living as a magic user. The aristocrat's life seems like paradise, and magic users are treated like royalty. Based on their status, they get titles and wealth. All they have to do is stay loyal and obedient. But behind that privilege lies the catch. You're forced to become the Empire's sword and give your life to the Order. On the battlefield, they're nothing more than dogs on the Empire's leash, living in the worst hellhole. Enoch said goodbye to many comrades on the battlefield the next day, wondering who'd be next. He didn't know how long he could keep going this way, and he was terrified for his daughter. That's why Rubenstein doesn't want Lilith's life to be like his. The day she was born, the first time he saw her, right then, she became his whole world. The thought of losing her was draining him. Speaking of it, he hugged her tight and tenderly. The girl understood her dad better than anyone, so she agreed to do it his way. But if he doesn't come back, this country falls. In the original story, Enoch came back to avenge his daughter's death. Captain Cheshire meticulously planned the Order's Knights' revolt and sparked a revolution. So, 10 years later, all the incompetent ones were dead because of the Emperor's mass purge order. It was basically genocide. Innocent people stripped of their magic, and only Enoch can stop it. If they run now, Enoch won't take the lead against the Emperor or rise up. Enoch won't lose anything by coming back. But then people like her won't die. Lilith didn't want to run away and watch her country fall apart either. Not to mention they'd have to hide for the rest of their lives. Her dad just didn't get it. His daughter had told him she wanted a happy, carefree life. Scoffing softly, the girl mumbled she'd changed her mind. Remembering the gifted aristocrats, she figured she could be one of them too. She'd actually get to eat something besides pasta every day and wear dresses with bows and ribbons. She knew she could use what she'd learned to wreck Cheshire's plan that'd kill so many people. Plus, once they returned, they wouldn't have to chop firewood or sell it at the store, and she wouldn't have to do the laundry. Here, the dad got all worked up. After telling her not to do the laundry, she kept doing it anyway. Realizing she'd said too much, Lilith apologized, saying she hadn't meant to act that way. But she still didn't get why he didn't want her to live and use all the opportunities out there. She wanted to live like an aristocrat, and her dad didn't even bother asking what she wanted. She wants more than just daddy calling her princess. She wants to be a real one. In that moment, rage flared in her eyes, and she snapped, "I'm not your daughter." That hit him like a ton of bricks. Lilith declared she was Duke Enoch's daughter, and if he refused, she'd beg her uncles to take her away. The man lost his words, never expecting such fire from a 7-year-old. He knew she was right. Swallowing hard, he gave in to her wish. They started packing. Lilith never imagined she'd leave her beloved cottage like this. Her quiet village life was over. She was buzzing with anticipation for what came next. Back in the carriage, Lilith kept thinking about it. Then, on a whim, she nudged her nose against her dad's sleeve. He panicked, checking if she was okay. She lifted her head and asked what was outside the window. She spotted some shadows. The captain told the Duke, "Those are werewolves." Rubenstein tensed. Those fang-filled wolf packs were closing in for sure. Out here, it was common. But the knight didn't expect them this near the village. He wasn't letting that slide. Enoch knew he couldn't sit back. He ordered his daughter to stay put and figure it out himself. He told the captain to guard the carriage. Lose a hair on Lilith's head, and he'd lose his own. He'd take care of the werewolves himself. Confident he could handle it faster than anyone else. He didn't realize it, but he was getting dangerously close to a group of monsters that had caught the scent of human flesh and were about to feast on him. Meanwhile, Lilith was pacing like crazy, clueless why the commander wasn't doing anything about it. The commander assured them the Duke would handle it, and he was right. Onyx's sword flared up with magic energy instantly. The next second, furry heads were flying and bodies dropped, splattering blood everywhere around him. The girl's jaw dropped. Watching the world's strongest man's magic was one thing, but actually seeing it in action was totally different. When Enoch came back, he gave the captain a hard time for just standing there like a statue when he'd been ordered to guard the carriage. The captain just praised the Duke for taking them out in a second, but couldn't figure out why he'd even bother wasting mana. Meanwhile, Lilith kept watching her father, realizing his status was skyrocketing way too fast. They arrived at the Temple of Southern Elphasia. Through its gates, they'd enter the capital city. The girl also changed into new clothes there, because no one can enter the capital in casual wear. Meanwhile, the knights were a bit uneasy. Was Duke Enoch chasing after her? She assured them everything was fine. Then they got curious. What happened when her dad got angry? Had he ever even raised a hand to her? Lilith didn't get why they were asking such weird questions, but it was because they knew what a scary duke he was. She reassured them he'd never hit her, not even yelled much. On the contrary, he loved her a lot. Then she asked why these guys thought her dad was so terrifying. One of them let slip how Rubenstein once tore a bear apart with his bare hands. It really shook the girl up, and she found out he was so cold no one could get close to him. At that moment, the commander was standing near the portal, and the knights asked for his confirmation about the Duke. He paused, lifting his head, and Lilith recognized the man. Now she knew why he'd seemed familiar. This is Axion Libra. He took over as commander after Rubenstein vanished, and he was a big deal. He had insane strength and an irresistible look about him. The knights started whispering that Enoch almost killed the commander, but their chat cut short by the door creaking open. Lilith saw her dad walk in and instantly sprinted to hug him. He looked absolutely unstoppable, and even if Lilith hadn't read the novel, she'd know he was the main character. Noticing his serious face, the girl froze right in front of him, and Enoch leaned down toward her. Then he scooped her up himself and pretended not to recognize her, mistaking her for a little angel. He even flashed a surprised look and declared it wasn't an angel, but the real-deal princess. That was their usual routine. He hugged her tight and joked he looked like a nobody compared to her now. The commander watched the whole thing, thinking it had gone way too far. He told them to stop wasting time and move out immediately, but Enoch just couldn't get enough of his little girl. It was time to go, and the Duke took a step into the portal, his daughter in his arms. The other side looked different, especially to Lilith, who was taking everything in with wonder. A group of priests greeted them, struggling to believe the Duke had actually returned. Time had passed since their last meeting. The high priest blessed his lordship. They also asked if he planned to head home right away. The welcome ceremony needed to happen. The priests had everything set up after hearing he might arrive, but Enoch decided to postpone it for next time. The journey had been long, and his daughter was exhausted. Later, they rode down the main street. The girl was shocked by how many people were out. Knights followed them, warning against distractions and urging them to head straight home. Lilith asked to walk. Even though it was a 15-minute walk home, the Duke offered to carry her. The girl refused. "If you carry me all the time, I'll forget how to walk," she said. But she promised to speak up if her legs ached. She kept her guard up, even though the hero no longer had a grudge. But Lilith did something that completely scuttled the original story's chance to begin. As they walked the streets, the girl saw everyone bowing to the Duke. They wished him the goddess Primera's blessings. The greetings felt endless. Lilith knew it was a bit much, considering this was a country where people bowed to greet each other. The way this world ignored human rights was exactly what her thesis was about. Now she had to find another main character, Cheshire, and make sure he met her dad. Her dad couldn't start a revolution alone, but Lilith just wanted to know what the hell actually happened here. The novel never explained how they met, and since Lilith was still alive, the Duke probably wouldn't care about Cheshire, so she had to force a meeting. But it was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Walking down the street, she noticed a group of people hiding in an alley. Plus, her dad had stopped. He thought there was trouble too, but told her not to worry. Patrols were everywhere. Lilith argued they should stop it, but her dad didn't want his girl risking danger over nothing. So she begged him not to be scared and just to go. "My dad's strong enough to handle anything," she added. The Duke agreed, and they turned into the alley. There, they saw two kids bullying another kid. Enoch immediately demanded the troublemakers explain themselves and stop the nonsense. The kids froze. The one they were bullying looked up, a mix of sadness and anger in his eyes. Then Lilith started yelling at the little jerks. They paled. No, it wasn't her voice they were scared of. They saw the Duke. They dropped to their knees, faces to the ground, and greeted him. But the Duke repeated his question. One of the boys explained that the lowborn didn't greet him properly, so he wanted to teach him a lesson. Lilith got furious and screamed at him for hitting the kid just because he didn't say hello. The boy who spoke noticed her priest-like outfit and apologized, adding he had the octave rank. That means he's gifted. But Lilith yelled it didn't give him the right to beat others up. The Duke just told those kids to stop causing trouble and get lost. The hooligans thanked his grace and, wishing him the goddess's blessings, vanished in an instant. Watching all that, the girl only became more convinced the revolution was necessary. She told Dad life in the capital was amazing, but then remembered that boy was still here. Approaching him, she asked if he was okay, even though his condition spoke for itself. Suddenly, she noticed blood on his face and offered to help, handing him a handkerchief. But the boy immediately pushed her hand away, as if she was about to do something terrible. Lilith knew he was scared and just apologized for touching him so suddenly. Then she placed the handkerchief on his leg so the boy could take care of the scrape. She felt terrible for him. She'd seen how he was beaten, and right then, that was all she could think about. But despite the scratches and dirt on his face, The boy seemed really handsome to Lilith. It hit her all of a sudden. His pitch-black hair and red eyes meant something. This was a novel world, and one rule never changed. She realized he was the main character, Chester. She figured she'd ask his name just to be sure, but he didn't even look at her. Like he didn't care. The Duke approached, checking on him, hoping the kid wasn't in too much pain. The kid just stood up in silence and tried to walk away, but with a hurt leg, it wasn't working. Enoch offered his hand. The red-eyed kid pushed Enoch's hand away again, like he was some enemy. The Duke didn't take offense. He got where the kid was coming from. Lilith didn't. She caught the boy's arm, demanding he wait. Her dad held her back, explaining there were plenty who hated nobles in this world. That's why that kid was uncomfortable. The Duke said to just let it go. Lilith reminded herself this was a novel world. The original story had to play out as written. She realized this was the fated meeting, written as a random encounter. As they kept moving, Lilith asked her dad if she could be friends with whoever she chose. The Duke paused. He didn't get what she meant. She clarified. Could she be friends with commoners when she was a noble? Enoch said it didn't matter if they were nobles, gifted, or commoners. Lilith could choose her friends. For him, the most important thing was his daughter being happy. Then, Lilith got curious where that boy had gone. For some reason, she kept worrying about him even though they'd just met. Then she admitted she wanted to be friends with this boy and asked her dad to find him later. She also wondered if his injuries could be healed and wanted to talk to him. The Duke just laughed sincerely and proudly declared he'd created an angel. He scooped up the little girl, promised her he'd find that boy. After all, he never said no to his princess. This really pleased Lilith, and in gratitude, she hugged her dad tightly. Meanwhile, she thought Cheshire should be living in Marquis Onyx's estate by now. Late at night in Marquis Jonathan's estate, someone scolded him for planning to throw that boy out. He raged that he couldn't stand having that brat in the house, but the father feared his powers would get exposed if he ended up on the streets. The Marquis was worried an investigation into his origins would start, and everyone would find out he was his illegitimate son. He didn't want the whole world knowing about him, so he decided to lock him up and raise him in secret. But Jonathan raged that the thing should just be killed because he couldn't breathe the same air as it. The Marquis didn't expect such a statement from his legitimate son, but forbade doing anything like that. He promised he wouldn't interfere with anything else. The young Marquis clenched his teeth and glared at his half-brother, but he didn't want to rile up their father either. Once the old man left, he grabbed the kid by the collar like he was about to hit him and started cursing him out with the nastiest words. Cheshire couldn't fight back, just watched as the young Marquis' fist swung over him. He didn't believe he had any abilities, even though he was the son of a gifted man. At the same time, he felt extremely tired and just closed his eyes, waiting for the inevitable. When they left him alone in the dark cell, the boy thought it would be easier to die, but he didn't even have the strength for that. In his pocket, he felt a handkerchief a little girl had left him not long ago. He immediately remembered how she'd sincerely apologized for accidentally touching him. She'd seemed like an angel to him, but she was just a noblewoman. And now he didn't get why he'd even accepted the handkerchief from her. A whirlwind of thoughts raced through his head that dark evening, and when he rolled onto his side, he started praying to die. When the Duke and his daughter arrived at the gates, the girl was over the moon. She'd never even dreamed of this. The palace was incredibly huge, and before entering, Lilith asked her dad to wait a bit. She wanted to mentally prepare herself, plus her dad hadn't been here in 7 whole years. And when the gates finally opened, a bunch of servants immediately ran out to greet the young master. Butler Rame was the happiest of all. Couldn't believe the Duke had finally returned. Then the servant noticed a little girl and realized she was the young mistress. He crouched down to be at her eye level, greeted her, and she introduced herself as Lilith. The butler stood up, bowed properly to the mistress, introduced himself as Rame, and asked her to just call him that. The housemaids gushed about how cute the kid looked and pointed out she was a dead ringer for the master. Enoch jumped in, asking Raim how long they'd be stuck outside, and Raim immediately invited them in. He apologized to the Duke and Lilith, explaining this was the most emotional moment of his 50 years. Raim admitted the rumors that the knights had been ordered by the Emperor to bring Enoch back, but no one expected this. The senior Duke, though, would be thrilled to see them, and Lilith remembered he was the one who always radiated that heavy aura. His name is Nordic Rubenstein. He's got special talents, and his story was dripping with grandeur. In the original, he was super nice to Cheshire, even though he acted indifferent, but secretly looked out for him. Lilith hoped her grandfather would be nice to her too, even if it probably took every ounce of his strength. Raim also announced Lady Ordia, Enoch's sister, was here and had always believed her brother would come back. For the girl, it was her first time hearing her aunt's name. She'd never been in the novel before. Raim promised to tell the kitchen staff to whip up the best snacks the Duke had ever tasted. Finally, they reached the entrance, and when the front door swung open, Lilith's breath hitched. Everything there didn't just look beautiful. It felt fit for a queen, like it was all set up even better than an emperor's. She wasn't sure if the gold surrounding her was real. Pretty much everything was draped in it, but it sure as hell looked the part. Looks like James Bryan wasn't just hiding his power. He'd also been keeping his insane wealth under wraps. The Duke himself strode in with confidence, but the girl was on edge. By the time they reached Nord's study, she was full-on freaking out. The study was huge, but the looming shadow of old Duke Rubenstein behind his desk made it feel suffocating. Enoch's sister gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth. She still couldn't believe he was back. Enoch himself greeted his father, and Lilith made sure Nord's presence wasn't just some exaggeration. Still, she tried to steady herself when Dad led her closer to the grandfather. The old man rose, but his greeting was about as warm as a snowstorm. No joy in his expression at all. Enoch noticed his father had aged a bit since their last meeting. But before hugs could happen, Nord cracked his son across the head with his cane. Ordia screamed at him to cool it. There was a kid here, and that actually made him stop. Lilith clung to her father like a lifeline. So tight, he could feel her whole body shaking. Nord shot the kid a skeptical look, but Enoch proudly declared it was his little princess. Clearly, the old man was stung that his son raised a kid alone for 7 years, without even sending word he was alive. Looks like Nordic figured his son had stayed away all these years because of Lilith. If she were in the grandfather's shoes, she'd hate someone like her too, but still didn't expect a reaction like that from him. She apologized to the old man, but Enoch instantly bristled, explaining his princess doesn't apologize for anything, told the dad to soften his expression, scaring the kid with that face. Nordic muttered something, and the girl cracked one eye open. She'd just squeezed them shut in fear. She saw the old man reaching for her and thought he was about to hit her. She squeezed her eyes shut again, instantly picturing how things could go from there. But Nordic crouched down, gently brushed her cheek, then ran his fingers through her silver hair. When Lilith opened her eyes, she was clearly surprised. Didn't get what was happening. Then it hit her. The old man was actually being pretty sweet, and her dad was quietly cheering from the sidelines. She introduced herself to the old man and declared she was thrilled to finally meet him. They had a warm family-style hug. No trace of anger left on the old man's face. He looked genuinely happy instead. Later, Ordia led the kid to meet her cousins, who happened to be twins. They'd always wanted a little sister, and the aunt's sure Lilith will win them over. The twins were also heirs to the Anthras Duchy. One's destined to be a holy knight, the other a magic swordsman. Ordia explained by their room that Theo's a little weak and she's worried about him. Then she opened the door and called her boys in, telling them to say hi to their cousin. The girl remembered this story's got everyone dying, and these two croaked at the very end. The twins were the few Cherry actually opened up to, and after they died, he nearly lost his mind. But still, they looked like someone copied and pasted them. They both stared at the little girl walking in, eyes wide. How could she be so tiny? Ordia admitted they're so identical that when they try to trick her, she can't always tell them apart. She told Leon and Theo their uncle came back a while back, then introduced the little girl, Lilith. Theo was first to say hi, declaring he's 12 years old. The girl remembered in the original story he died first and became a holy knight. He had this soft, caring vibe and looked out for Cherry like a real big brother. But in spring, after his knighting, he tragically died from a birth defect. But that's 4 years from now. So Lilith greeted him with a cheerful wave. Leo hung back, but his mom told him to come over and say hi to his cousin. The boy joked she's lying about her age. After all, he was way taller when he was 7. Then Ordia smirked and explained that while her boys looked identical, their personalities were total opposites. Theo's all gentle and sweet, but Leo's a troublemaker, and it bugged her enough to make him instantly bristle. His mom told him to chill, reminding him that if he kept acting like that, not a single girl would ever like him. She also brought up how he scared the ballerina with a giant spider, and he fired back that the lady clearly digs spiders. Ordia insisted the girl was just trying to impress him, but no lady would ever say something like that. Leo was the playful type who loved chatting, usually sparking harmless squabbles with Chazir, but he still adored him. In the novel, Leo died during a monstrous battle, taking a hit to shield Chazir from certain death. That part of the story was absolutely gut-wrenching. Even Lilith felt tears prick her eyes thinking about it. Now she's waving him over, suggesting they be friends and go spider hunting together. She claims she loves spiders too, but let's just say she had her own reasons for saying that. She noticed Leo's brother giving her a weird look all of a sudden. Then he grabbed her chubby pink cheek and squeezed it like it was a cotton candy patty. He totally miscalculated the force, and she yelped in pain, barely holding back a scream. Ordia lost her cool over the little girl, and Theo was all over his brother for the brutal pinch. Lilith knew it hurt, but she wasn't about to cry over it, until it just happened anyway. Just then, she remembered the story, and Theo instantly started hovering over her, begging her not to cry. Aunt Ordia immediately started scolding her mischievous son for standing there like a statue, and he quickly apologized for his actions. The boy, realizing he'd messed up, apologized to the little girl, who reassured him that nothing bad had happened. She even apologized for suddenly bursting into tears, insisting it hadn't hurt at all. She just asked him to be a bit gentler next time. Her skin was way too sensitive. Leo already got the message, but he could still feel his mom's critical glare and warning look. By the time evening rolled around and dinner was served, Lilith couldn't believe how fancy the appetizers were. They'd seated her between her two brothers, and once everything was ready, they dug into the meal. Aunt Ordia urged the girl to eat more, clearly looking out for her health. Lilith was a bit flustered. There were so many utensils, she had no idea where to start or what to do. But then she figured she'd just watch Leo, the brother sitting right next to her, to see which utensil to grab. Just then, the door creaked open, and Duke Rubenstein stepped into the dining hall. Eno still hadn't shown up. He'd promised to join after he finished unpacking. Lilith finally got a grip on what the nobles were serving, but she was too nervous to tell if it actually tasted good. Out of nowhere, Grandpa turned to Leo, saying he knew all about the ruckus the kid had stirred up. Ordia quickly explained that her son apologized to the ballerina, and she'd personally meet up with her to say sorry too. Lilith caught the tone and realized something bigger was going on. Earlier, they'd only talked about a spider, but then the old man clarified that Leo's 12 now, so he should know what the name Rubenstein means. Always double-check and keep his actions in check to avoid any trouble. He's got to follow proper etiquette, not act reckless, and set an example others can look up to. The old man also hoped he wouldn't hear anything that could disgrace the family name. He was the perfect example of a noble family. His words hit the girl so hard, she almost started crying. She'd never studied aristocratic etiquette, and now she felt ashamed. She didn't even know how to eat steak. She decided to wait it out, hoping to copy others, but Leo noticed she wasn't touching her food. Theo noticed she wasn't holding any utensils, and assumed she'd already eaten. Her aunt caught his worry, not getting why the girl was acting up. Lilith felt all eyes on her, and wondered if she should admit she had no idea what the rules were. Her aunt and grandfather needed to know she hadn't used any utensils, but she still feared they'd be even more disappointed. Plus, the dad hadn't shown up yet, someone who could handle this mess. And just then, Enoch walked into the dining hall, apologizing for being late. Lilith mentally rejoiced that her rescuer had finally arrived, immediately offering to eat together. Audrey's shrill scream cut through the room as she anxiously watched her son Leo. The boy grabbed a massive steak bite with his fork and chewed it like a starved animal, totally ignoring table manners. His brother Theo copied him, lazily cutting up a slab of meat with a knife like he'd never seen one before. This only made his mother even more furious. She couldn't fathom why he couldn't act properly at the table. But Theo just tossed Lilith the hacked-up meat to eat, then grabbed her portion for himself. It hit her then. These kids were watching her closely, having noticed her struggle with the utensils. She beamed so hard her face lit up, so happy to have such awesome brothers all of a sudden. Their mom, meanwhile, was practically panicking over the mess, like the boys were begging to get scolded. She rushed to apologize to their dad, but he cut her off, which left her totally confused. He speared a meat chunk with his fork and barked, "Just start eating already." The whole table fell silent and dug in. When Lilith took her first bite, it felt like heaven melted in her mouth. She caught her dad watching her, smirking like he'd just won the lottery. When the grandfather gave her a raised eyebrow, she declared loud enough for everyone to hear, "This stuff is amazing." The old man gave her a thumbs up and said, "Eat more, you little angel." After dinner, Enoch escorted his daughter to her new room, which was massive and stuffed with all kinds of toys. The girl was over the moon with excitement, practically dancing around, thrilled to be living in all this luxury. When she saw the soft, fluffy bed, she plopped down on it instantly and sank into the mattress like a cloud. Enoch walked over to her and asked if she remembered that boy they met in the alley. After she said yes, he admitted he was practically there. Just a little more to go. He told his daughter that as soon as he did, he'd go straight to the boy and ask if he needed help. Lilith thanked him, but asked him to take it slow. She knew that even with all the will in the world, tracking down Cheshire right now would be tough. They'd crossed paths by accident before, and according to the original timeline, she wasn't supposed to meet her dad for another 2 years. He's currently being hidden at Marcus Onyx's estate, and her dad just returned and doesn't know how the capital works yet. He's not the type to rely on illegal guilds working in the shadows to track someone down. Still, the girl knew she had to help somehow and told her father not to stress and to get some rest. The next morning, the butler brought her 2 maids, Jetty and June, who'd look after her while her dad was tied up with work. He's got to get back into his responsibilities after 7 years of being away. Ram also mentioned that these maids were highly experienced and would make great assistants. Jetty introduced herself first, listed her qualifications, and added that she's really good at drawing and cooking. June is her younger sister, and she's got her own set of talents. She's mostly known for being super physically fit, but now she's sworn to serve Lilith with heart and soul. The girl didn't really get how those skills would help with baby duty, but she still said hello. June picked up the baby, and both servant sisters cooed over how adorable she was. The butler interrupted, saying it was time to wrap up the meet and greet, and announced he'd explain Lilith's schedule next. The master ordered her training to start today, and teachers will be here by 10 a.m. The servants looked a little sorry for her having to study on day 2 of arriving in the capital. Still, Lilith wanted to learn. She's into it and promised to try her hardest. First class was math, and Lady Lena started with an apple-themed word problem. They had to solve a basic equation, the kind taught in elementary school. They asked her to multiply 2 apples by 2, then add 2 more, and Leo blurted out 6 instantly. The teacher told him to slow down and let the young lady answer. Lilith herself liked it when others spoke for her. Math has always been tough for her, unlike humanities. The teacher told her not to panic and said mistakes were fine, even offering a hint. Leon cut in and told his sister she didn't have to, which annoyed the teacher again after she'd asked for silence. Lilith was too busy hunting for Cheshire to care about homework. He joined their family at 13, now he's 11, and stuck putting up with the Marquis's taunts for 2 years. Lilith couldn't let the kid suffer. She figured she'd help her dad find him as fast as possible. First, she needed to track down the guild leader, who'd be her dad's ally in a few years. But getting to him meant sneaking out, and a kid alone wouldn't get past security, especially mid-lesson. The girl just filled out the whole table without even thinking, and Lena had no clue how she pulled it off. Her brothers peeked at her paper and were equally stunned, figured their sister was a genius. She nailed 19 times problems without breaking a sweat, and even Lilith was like, "Whoa, how?" She realized this could blow back in her face. No 7-year-old could crack that table. But hey, some kids are just born smart. Maybe this wasn't the end of the world. If she finished homework quick, she'd get to help her dad sooner. She told the teacher it worked out, because she explained it well. Reminded her how she'd taught with apple math. The Countess was still confused. She hadn't even covered 19 times. She begged her to ignore it and just keep talking about multiplication. The Countess declared that this young lady is a once-in-a-century genius. She took the little girl by the hands and vowed to do everything she could to support her education. The girl beamed with joy, but at the time, she had no idea this moment would later lead to a massive catastrophe. Later, when lunchtime rolled around, Lilith took a bite of dessert and was absolutely over the moon. It wasn't just delicious. It was the absolute best thing she'd ever tasted in her life. The brothers chimed in, urging her to try more dishes and shoving bite-sized pieces into her hands from every direction. She stuffed her cheeks to the brim, looking like a little squirrel, but absolutely adorable doing it. Auntie was thrilled to see the little one eating so heartily, though she gently warned her to slow down and avoid a stomachache. A carriage pulled up outside, and Ordia lit up instantly. Countess Ballerina had arrived. She arrived with her daughter, Erica, who waved cheerfully to the hosts from the street. Leo suddenly tried to hide behind her back, but Lilith deadpanned that he was still completely visible. Then Theo clarified that his brother didn't exactly get along with Erica. Days ago, he'd scared her with a giant spider. Erica had been really upset, and Leo got a serious scolding from his mom. So, he's been avoiding her ever since. But just then, Erica walked into the room and spotted Leo immediately. Seeing him trying to hide behind the little girl, the young countess crossed her arms and demanded an explanation. Tension suddenly crackled in the air. Erica had no idea about their sister Lilith and demanded to know who this girl was. Her jealous tone felt a little off to Lilith, more like a medieval romance script than anything real. Ordia walked in, checking on Erica's forehead, then switched focus, asking who the girl was. She found out it's the boy's cousin who came back with Duke Rubenstein yesterday. Erica felt awkward, explaining she hadn't been told a thing. Her mood shifted instantly. Turning to the Duke's daughter, she complimented how angelic she looked. Then she admitted she'd been a little jealous of Leo and introduced herself as 12-year-old Erica Ballerina. Lilith politely returned the compliment, noting how striking she looked. Erica smiled, then casually dropped that she'd already promised to spend her whole life with Leon. That annoyed Leo, but Erica kept rambling about future family plans, ignoring him. Lilith realized this girl was serious, clearly into bad boys if she'd latched onto him like that. That evening, Lilith's dad burst in, slamming the door so hard she jumped. He immediately lunged for a hug, had missed her all day. Once the excitement died down, they talked about dinner. Enoch admitted he'd already eaten. Lilith shared how she'd gone to the tailor with her aunt and brothers, got measured, and bought some new clothes. She absolutely loved hitting the stores, especially this one dress that looked just like a princess's. Then Enoch asked about her schoolwork, and his daughter admitted she'd been studying for a few hours. And Dad apologized, explaining it was Grandpa who insisted on a few extra lessons. But she wasn't mad, getting that you gotta learn stuff. Plus, she actually liked it and thought it was kind of fun. It surprised Enoch a little, and the girl promised to let him know if it ever got too tough or boring. After hearing her out, Enoch admitted the teacher had been raving about her, called her a genius. But he'd never doubted it in the first place. She didn't think it was a big deal, basic grade school stuff. But she was happy he was proud. He gave her another big hug and started cooing at her, trying to say she was just like him. Lilith was cracking up the whole time, nodding along with his every word. She wanted to know what he'd been up to all day, even though it was obvious he had a ton on his plate. But it felt good seeing him proud, and she even started to like the idea of being a genius herself. When the next lesson rolled around, she realized just how full of herself she'd been. The teacher was Robert Quinn. He works in the Magic Tower, in the department that studies gifted abilities. Enoch caught her nerves and told her not to panic, just answer the guy's questions calmly. He also told her if she didn't know something, she could just be honest about it. After a while, when the teacher checked the results, he admitted the kid was a genius too. In this world, if kids show talent in subjects like math, the Magic Tower watches them to provide training. Grandpa had reached out to the tower before to test Lilith's abilities, but Enoch was furious because Nordic hadn't even consulted him. The old man explained it was a routine test, and his granddaughter was going to the Magic Tower no matter what. If the results are good, Enoch can move freely while Lilith's training goes on. In the Pavilion Empire, everyone with special abilities has to be drafted into service, and the tower handles it. After stating his decision, Nordic called Lilith in for a chat. During the chat, Grandpa told her not to panic and just do what she did in class. Now, Lilith realized she'd overdone it, and the situation had taken a turn she wasn't expecting. Magic doesn't work without formulas, and the folks who create them are tower staff. They're all math geniuses, so the tower scouts talent and starts training the gifted kids young. She remembered this was in the original canon, but she never thought things would blow up like this. Now she felt more like an idiot than a genius, and after the test, they introduced her to someone else. In the hall, on a carved chair, sat Oscar Manuel, the youngest tower head in history. Lilith forgot all her problems for a moment, never imagining she'd meet someone so high up. The tower head's basically their enemy. Her dad was gearing up for a rebellion, rounding up high-level prodigies. The nobles and politicians all backed Oscar, and he never gave Lilith's dad a single break. If they'd had the Magic Tower's support, where he's got major influence, the revolution might have wrapped up 3 years earlier. But Lilith's never been sure Oscar was really on the Emperor's side. She could never figure out what he was after. So she decided to fake being a genius and join the Magic Tower to get close to Oscar. After that, she felt way more confident, just had to solve problems like she did yesterday. And when Teacher Robert showed the results to her dad, even he had to admit, Lilith was a genius. Oscar, though, he looked unimpressed. "I came here to work, not watch kids play around," he said. Then he barked, "Check it again, more carefully," and slapped up a new problem on the board. They gave her a linear equation. Oscar told her to give it a shot, though he didn't think she'd crack it. She didn't plan on solving it, figured it was insane. Plus, she noticed that guy was obsessed with genius stuff, so she just said, "I don't know," which totally floored the tower head. The teacher rushed in. "Don't worry, even prodigies can't solve this at 7. Then Enoch scooped up his daughter. "This problem's tough, but my princess is still a genius," he declared. Only the tower head stayed annoyed, thinking he'd wasted his time on some dumb kid. He was walking out, and Lilith knew it was bad, until her dad suddenly called out for Oscar to hold on. He made him repeat his words, and Oscar didn't hesitate. Right back at her with the same insult, calling her a waste of time. That set the Duke off. He exploded, demanding Oscar apologize to his daughter on the spot. But Oscar wasn't having it. He insisted the Duke should apologize for making him waste an hour and a half of his time. He only came out of curiosity, wanting to see the daughter of that Enoch Rubenstein. Now he was convinced she was no different from any other kid, just lucky to solve that number puzzle. But the Duke argued no one, not a single person, could do what she did at 7 years old. He demanded the tower head apologize again, but Oscar flat out refused. The air was thick with tension. Enoch was ready to lose it, but Nordic barely held him back. Then Enoch stepped in, apologized to Oscar himself, and begged him to let it rest, admitting he hadn't lived up to expectations. But the tower head didn't hold back. He insulted the old man, saying all that sharp mind Enoch once had was long gone. Lilith heard every word. She wasn't about to let anyone get away with disrespecting her family. Oscar's words, calling her a talentless dreamer, were the last straw, and his jab at the Duke, telling him to focus on the family he'd neglected and lead properly. That's when Lilith stepped forward and declared she'd solved that equation, shocking everyone in the room. The girl just asked for 5 minutes to figure it out, but she also set one condition. If she could solve it, Oscar would personally apologize to her dad and grandpa for his stupid remarks. The head of the magic tower gave a crooked smile and agreed. Enoch got nervous and started begging the kid not to make him, but the girl had already made up her mind. For the next 5 minutes, everyone watched as she meticulously drew with chalk on the board. When she wrote a column of simple equations, she turned to Oscar and declared he was 17 years old. Seeing the brilliant solution, he admitted defeat, bowed, and apologized to the Dukes. Lilith wondered why this guy suddenly became so polite. She thought he'd keep being a jerk. Now she saw some kind of madness in his eyes. The same kind he had when he made that proposal about her training. But from someone like him, you couldn't expect anything else. Still, the girl didn't fully get what was going on. After that, they had dinner with the head of the magic tower, and he even offered to personally train the girl. She agreed only because it was a chance to try and win him over, but the more she tried to do something, the worse it got. And when she saw him walking through the door, she suddenly got scared. Oscar walked in, thanked her for the food, then calmly sat down. In that moment, he seemed like a completely different person. Right then, the head offered the girl a bit more math practice. You don't hold back for the sake of a goal. So Lilith agreed again without protest. He started explaining how to craft a magic formula and mathematically lay out the concept of space. From that, the girl realized magic was pretty systematic, and then learned there were numbers less than 0. Oscar showed her the equation. Lilith already knew about it, but pretended to see it for the first time. Obviously, the tower head was about to explain negative numbers to her. Then out of nowhere, Oscar said the kid looked not just small, but tiny as hell. He figured her height for a 7-year-old was way below normal. There was a good reason for it, but Lilith thought this guy might actually know something about it. So Oscar guessed she wasn't eating enough, which was why she was growing so slow. The girl couldn't tell if he was just spouting nonsense or if he really didn't know her secret. The tower head kept muttering about her needing to eat more to grow. Then work with him. Working at the magic tower would make her life easier. And though she didn't want to, she promised to think about it. That night, Lilith remembered others had noticed how tiny she was for her age too. Before, she'd thought she was just a background character, growing slower than other kids. But there was a reason, something natural for a duke's daughter, which she wasn't actually. Taken by the imperial family, she was a forgotten side character, until her death was finally revealed. While Lilith was thinking about it, Dad walked in, called her a genius again, and reminded her it was time for bed. She was getting sick of that nickname, and asked Dad to quit calling her that. Dad didn't get why. After all, she'd done great. But Grandpa had a rare smile on his face. Nordic always taught his son to stay cold, but today he was barely hiding his excitement. Lilith still had a lot on her mind, so she told Dad to go to bed. But Dad thought she was just restless, so he offered to read an interesting kids' book. The story he was about to read was called Princess Trapped in the Tower. Enoch loved reading to his daughter. Though she didn't enjoy it, she waited patiently until he finished. The Duke began reading about a king and his princess once upon a time, doting on his daughter. Years later, when the princess turned 7, a cruel king from a neighboring country kidnapped her. The princess's father cried every day, offering the cruel king treasures, even offering to be his servant. But he still didn't return the princess. Lilith even flinched at this part. She couldn't grasp how a daughter could be torn from her father. Then it hit her. This story felt oddly familiar. The grieving king once met a boy, and this boy was incredibly strong. The king adopted him as a son and believed he'd one day meet the princess and become a great brother to her. Lilith insisted they keep going. The story was getting way too gripping to stop now. She heard how, one night, the evil king told the good king the princess had fallen ill and died. Enoch was starting to panic, not getting what was wrong with the story, while Lilith pushed him to read on. She argued the evil king could be lying and still believed the princess was alive. The Duke read how the good king lost it with rage and vowed to team up with the prince to take down the evil king. They crushed every villain in that kingdom, cornered the evil king, and prepped to tear him apart. This tale hit way too close to home for Lilith. The plot was basically Enoch Rubenstein's love story. She saw her dad and the good king fighting to avenge her death. And that princess, it was her, Lilith Rubenstein. To save his kidnapped daughter, he threw himself into battle again and again. When he learned she was dead, he turned his sword on the emperor. She hid in plain sight, using a fake identity. But the emperor found her, locked her up, and drained her power. Tricked by the emperor, the princess snapped and started randomly killing people. Enoch Rubenstein tried everything to save his daughter, but never found a way to. And in the whole empire, there was only one person who could stop her. When Enoch hit a similar spot, he decided to stop reading. It didn't feel like a kid's fairy tale anymore. From then on, he made it a rule to preview stories first before reading them to his daughter. But she argued that, despite everything, the ending was still happy, which totally caught Enoch off guard. Lilith explained that if the princess hadn't been kidnapped, the good king wouldn't have had to take down the bad guy. She didn't feel bad for that princess. King brainwashed her, and she killed a bunch of people. But Enoch still didn't see it as a happy ending. The princess was dead, and Lilith kept pushing back. Dad pointed out the good king was the main character. His beloved daughter died. That's a tragedy. So basically, everyone else lived happily except the main guy. If the main character isn't happy, it's a bad ending. A dad who lost his daughter can't be happy. As Enoch explained, Lilith remembered the original story had a happy ending. After Chasir attacked Enoch's daughter, Rubenstein, the story ended with the birth of a new peaceful empire. But she got curious. What happened to Dad after the original story wrapped up? She didn't know if the main character was happy in that peaceful country built on his daughter's grave. So she started wondering, how would Enoch have lived after her death if he was a good king and she was the princess? The Duke was horrified for a moment, then declared that he wouldn't be able to live at all in that case. Then he suggested that in that fairy tale, the good king probably thought the same way. When he found out the princess was dead, he didn't follow her right away because he planned to do it after his revenge. Lilith suddenly realized her dad would die too, and he explained she'd understand when she had her own kids. Hugging his daughter, Enoch repeated that if he lost his princess, he'd follow her. That only made the girl more emotional. She even screamed like she just had a nightmare. The Duke explained it's just a fairy tale, and he wouldn't let something like that happen. If it did happen, he wouldn't give the bad king a chance to be his servant. He'd rescue the princess from captivity right away. Lilith suddenly asked if all the gifted had to go to the battlefield whenever the emperor ordered. Enoch confirmed, but also repeated what he'd said before, that his princess didn't have to do it at all. The girl doubted. After all, if she had a powerful ability, she'd be obligated to go. Turns out the Duke already had a plan he didn't think was special, but didn't say what it was, because it was time for bed. But Lilith already guessed what her dad was talking about, since he was meeting the emperor soon. He'd probably ask His Majesty to have his daughter excused from duty. And the trade-off was obvious to the emperor. The Duke would become a dog who'd obey without protest. Like that fairy tale, the good king ended up as the evil king's pawn. Even if her daughter wasn't kidnapped, Dad would still be trapped because he'd demand her release from service. Either way, the good king becomes the bad king's piece in a war with no winning side. Her dad's the main character who hates empires like this one. Tyranny and conquest all the way. Now, she can't forget his warning about the story's bad ending. Her dad can't survive without her. Lilith thought the daughter was the story's starting point, but really, it's the revenge decision. Every move the Duke made was aimed at her, and it all ended in tragedy. So now Lilith's goal isn't just helping her dad get a happy ending. She's got to survive too. If she stays with her dad and stays safe, whatever happens after doesn't matter. Lilith's sure the Duke of Rubenstein gets his happy ending after the original story wraps up, so she promised herself she'd do anything for her dad. In this empire, there's an organization that controls the gifted, dividing them into 6 ranks. One's called Example, the source of all magic, a near-God almighty being. Since Example's so rare, only one born per generation, and they've only come from the imperial family. The 12th prince's rank was set at court, and the emperor was furious he wasn't an Example. None of his 14 kids ever became the chosen, and this started worrying the people. The king was terrified he'd never have one, but the mages told him to chill. Emperor Nicholas von Pavilion's still young and healthy, so a chosen's gotta show up eventually. 7 years ago, when Enoch left, the emperor lost his cool. Losing a powerful duke was a huge blow, but Nicholas waited. He knew the mighty chosen could wipe even smart people's minds. It drains a ton of life force, especially on someone like Enoch Rubenstein. His Majesty had to put up with a lot for 7 years, just to gather the strength. The Conqueror Emperor's still smarting from a few countries' defeats. Now Nicholas knows Duke Rubenstein's back, with his daughter. That's a huge gift for the Emperor. Soon, the Empire will be the only name left on the continent. The next morning, Lilith had to head to the training room, and the maids started prepping her. Meanwhile, the girl sat on her bed, legs dangling off the edge, thinking about how people called her short. She knew it herself. Her growth just stopped. It bugged her. If this keeps up, everyone will realize who she really is. Her height's an emergency. First, though, she's got to handle the first part of the plan, then hustle to the Talent Institute. Gifted individuals go there to harness the Emperor's power and polish their skills the right way. Lilith needs to start using her abilities ASAP. Once she starts draining life energy, she can grow like the rest. Meanwhile, the maids started whispering about the 12th prince-ranked court. Rumor has it the gods gave up on the imperial family. They just can't produce any examples. June found that weird. Usually the first or second kid always got that power, Jetty agreed. Yeah, there are a ton of princes, but still no heir. Example is the heir with absolute power, born once per generation, and only in the imperial family. But looks like this emperor missed out on that perk, and Lilith was even glad about it. The maids guessed maybe the example was born in a regular family, even though that's insane. Then they finished packing her up and handed her a bunny-shaped backpack. She said thanks and zipped it on instantly. Time to kickstart her rescue mission. When the maid lifted her to say goodbye, Lilith asked where the clinic was. The question hit June as odd, but she still walked her through the route. Soon, the girl knocked on the door, and a sleepy-eyed guy poked his head out. The guy gaped at the little duchess, but she just smiled and called him Flynn. The guy was super shocked the girl knew his name. He hadn't even introduced himself yet. Lilith said her sister raved about him as a top doctor who could handle any crisis. Then she insisted she was totally fine and handed him some garden-fresh flowers as a gift. Flink perked up. Those flowers were about to spice up the boring vibe in the room. The girl wasted no time, straight up asking if the doc had any fairy tears. Also known as salvation, it's a miracle cure, and Lilith wanted to know where to get some. Super rare stuff. The royal family guards it tight, only handing it out to select families monthly. But as a Rubenstein heir, Lilith had claim to it, and the doc thought she was a solid candidate. Noticing his cheerful vibe, she asked for a bit to brew her dad some tea. Her concern for her dad tugged at Flink's heart. He instantly agreed to hand over some meds. Then he slid a form across the table. "Fill this out," he told her. Lilith scribbled her details fast and stashed the medicine in her backpack the second she got it. Now she needed to get outside. But no way they'd let her out solo. She needed an escort. So she started brainstorming who was tough enough to help her escape and guard her outside. Jetty and June popped into her head first. But then she realized that might not be the smartest move. She thought about her personal guard. But even he didn't feel like the right fit. Louis is out too. He's the family's top warrior in the private army. The answer hit her when her cousins showed up and asked to play. They started suggesting games. Chasing ants was one of the ideas. The twins were prodigies. They'd already graduated from the academy and proven their skills. Their rank? Dues. They were the strongest in the house after the Duke. Lilith told them she was done playing and wanted to eat. She didn't want to go to the dining hall. It all tasted the same. She wanted something weird. But it wasn't available. Her worried brothers asked what she really wanted. She wanted the food she used to eat with her dad back at the old home. Theo suggested asking the chef to make it. Leo disagreed. Their chefs didn't know what commoners ate, so they decided to just go out. They offered to take her to a restaurant. Still, they doubted they'd get permission. Their mom would never let them go to a commoner's joint. One brother thought about how to convince their mom. Meanwhile, Lilith pushed, saying she was starving. Then Leo had an idea. They didn't need permission. They could just sneak out. They slipped out through a small hole in the fence. It was the only way to escape unnoticed. Captain Theo came up with the plan, and as Lilith wriggled through the tight tunnel, she was glad she didn't suffer from claustrophobia. Unfortunately, the boys couldn't dig a bigger hole because it would become too obvious later. But Lilith didn't back down. Soon enough, she followed her brothers through to the other side of the fence. She came out covered in dirt, but she didn't mind the mess. What mattered was that everything was going according to plan. The brothers grabbed her hands, ready to press on. Then one of the boys suddenly felt a sharp wave of dizziness, and Lilith panicked. His brother realized it was another episode and suggested he take a break to avoid drawing unwanted attention. Theo assured them he was fine. It usually happened 5 days after a migraine like this. Now Lilith remembered. He had a super rare condition that triggered these episodes exactly 5 days later. One of the twins, originally destined to die, plays a key role in advancing Chesia's arc and tugging at readers' heartstrings. That's why kind-hearted Theo was built from the ground up with a congenital rare disease. He's meant to heal Chesia after her trauma, then step aside once the mission's done. He's sick from mana collision, a rare sickness that causes periodic seizures. He'll die in spring after his knighthood ceremony, so basically, he's living his last years. The boy noticed how deep in thought Lilith was, and assumed she wasn't feeling well, but she assured him she was fine. Theo's sickness is thought to be untreatable, but the truth is, there's a way to beat it. Hidden in an ancient text, it mentions the heart of the saints. It's just a metaphor, but nobody had any idea what it actually meant. Cheesier cracked the code. After Theo died, he got obsessed with solving that ancient text. Eventually, he tracked down the Holy Heart and laid it on Theo's grave, kicking himself because it was already too late. He went through hell to decode the message, and Lilith doesn't stand a chance of stumbling onto it that easy. But then it hit her. She already knew exactly what to do. She'd read the original so many times. That means she can save him. No more pain, no more terrible agony for him. Lilith sidled up to her big bro and asked him to buy her something tasty. It was part of the plan. They hit the street she had in mind, and the girl pointed at one of the shops. That's Will Duncan's shop, owned by a former swordsmith and his squire. The sign looked sketchy, but it was the biggest store in the alley. Lilith's certain the Holy Heart is right here. They walked in, and the shopkeeper welcomed them with a smile. The guys started scanning the place. They'd never been in anything like this before, but Lilith already had a plan cooking. On one shelf, she spotted a little glass case. Exactly what they needed. Then she turned to her brothers and declared, "I want that cute little thing." All three, the boys and the shopkeeper, were horrified when they saw what the little girl had picked as a gift for herself. The liquid inside shimmered a deep purple, like stars trapped in a jar. Lilith stared at it, totally captivated. From the outside, it looked like she thought it was some kind of toy. Then the shopkeeper explained it was a mana core, ripped straight out of a dead monster's body. He also said it wasn't appropriate for a noble lady. Leo chimed in, warning it was super dangerous, because mana leaks out constantly. If you carry it around, you could get addicted. It was in a special glass container that partially sealed the mana in. Even though Lilith insisted she could handle it, Leo wasn't convinced. She hadn't even started at the academy yet. The girl stood her ground. Her brother was getting annoyed and told her to stop being a crybaby, but Lilith knew Theo's episode was in 5 days. If she didn't get this now, there wouldn't be another chance. She knew how to avoid the sickness, and she wasn't about to let her brother go through it. Since they wouldn't agree, she had only one option left. She dropped to the floor, started kicking her legs and screaming like a banshee. Perfect time to use kid privileges. Only a kid could get away with crying on the floor like that. In the end, the girl got her way. The monster core was sealed into a special pendant. The boys were worried. They knew their mom would skin them alive when she found out how much was spent. Lilith didn't let them get all emotional, cheerfully declaring she absolutely loved the gift. Next, they headed to the 13th Street in the Valentine district for Rico's restaurant. As they were about to order, the twins couldn't believe their sister actually ate this kind of food back in Zanan. But it tasted great. This was a spot their dad used to visit, and she was glad she found it so easily. The brothers finally decided to place their order, and one of them immediately called over a waitress. He even promised to pay double if the service was top-notch. The waitress with the tray began serving, but Lilith suddenly stopped her. Leo quickly whispered in her ear that she shouldn't raise her voice at commoners outside the house. Theo asked their brother not to be so strict. Grandpa wasn't around, and Lilith wasn't used to this yet. Leo explained she needed to get used to it faster. Grandpa would tear her apart if she messed up later. The girl pressed on, slipping the waitress a gold coin, hoping she wasn't overstepping. But this place was disguised as a regular restaurant, and Lilith ordered something not on the menu. In reality, it was a secret information guild called the Red Hawk. She ordered herself pickled herring, which her brothers found super strange. But Lilith didn't look away, and by the waitress's expression, she knew she'd been perfectly understood. They explained they don't serve it as a separate dish, but they'll whip it up if a VIP customer really wants it. Lilith perked up and declared she could share a secret recipe while they cooked. The girl didn't need to ask twice. They led her straight to the kitchen, which turned out to be totally empty. They kept moving, and the waitress knocked on another door, calling out that a guest was here for Rico. A deep baritone voice called from inside, telling them to come in. The door creaked open. Lilith's nerves spiked. She knew this guy despised people with power, abilities, and status. This was Rico, head of the Red Hawk Guild, and he was sitting behind a pretty creepy mask. The mask stared at her with a creepy grin, and the voice underneath told her to have a seat. The room itself was a nightmare, but Lilith stepped in carefully and sat across from Rico. Before starting the conversation, she asked for a minute to catch her breath. But the man wanted to know how she'd even heard about this place. She could answer, but declared he'd have to give her some useful info first. This was like a buyer-seller deal, and she wasn't paying with cash. She'd trade info. Rico got her drift and dropped his question. He wasn't about to pay for it. Then he suggested getting to the point. But if the guest wanted info, she'd have to pay the agreement fee first. Lilith agreed and started by saying Duke Rubenstein had returned to the capital after 7 years. Rico already knew that, so she'd have to tell him something else. She then admitted she was his 7-year-old daughter, Lilith. But the masked man already knew that too. He leaned in closer, guessing she'd come just for fun. The girl admitted she was actually there to ask him for a favor. Next, she asked if he really had a son he was hiding from Marquis Onyx. Rico figured out how a little girl, who'd arrived in the capital 4 days ago, knew this, and why she'd come to him. He'd also heard the tower had personally tested her abilities, since she was a gifted kid. Lilith admitted she wanted to save a child, and asked him to pass along the Marcus's secret. Not necessarily herself, she asked for it to go to anyone who could save Rico's son. The masked man realized the young girl needed a messenger, and asked who the recipient would be. Lilith proudly declared it was her father, Duke Enoch Rubenstein. Right now, Dad only knows the kid's face, so he'll need time to find him. She explained her father had just returned, and didn't know the situation. He also had family matters to handle. Rico smirked, thinking a 7-year-old couldn't have come alone, and figured the Duke had sent her. Lilith made it clear her dad's in the dark, which is why she wants the info sent anonymously. The voice under the mask didn't get why she couldn't just lay it out for the Duke herself, because then she'd have to explain how she even found out in the first place. Rico caught on. This little lady's got a secret she's not ready to share with her dad, but she shot back that she's actually looking for a replacement, which sounded fishy as hell, meaning Rico had to break the news about Duke Enoch's illegitimate kid. The girl confirmed his guess, but the guy wanted more details from Lilith before he'd play along. He wanted to know who this kid really was and where she'd gotten her intel. She just said keeping her name out meant no one to dig into her secrets. Though not everyone gets that. 'Cause come on, it's not smart to think a kid's that careless. Lilith dropped that she's been in the business a while. The masked guy just laughed, despite the girl dead serious. She's got a bunch of secrets to drop on her dad, and hopes her future deals with Rico go smooth. Rico cut her off quick, reminding her he only deals in info. Lilith pressed on, saying she's got all the dirt and promised Rico'd be happy with the deal. Then she shoved a small package toward him. He opened it slow, no rush. Inside was a bundle of grass, giving off a faint glow. Lilith said it's a universal antidote that could cure Rico's younger sister's illness. The man grabbed his head. He'd always been behind, but now he was a step ahead for the first time. Then he started asking, more angrily, what the Rubenstein family was planning and how the Duke had discovered his secret. Realizing Rico was angry, Lilith got a little scared, but assured him her dad knew nothing about it. But he didn't believe her and started drawing his knife, so she begged him to talk. Then she added angrily that she'd handle things herself and didn't need help from him. The man just laughed again, then sliced his palm open. The little girl was terrified. She couldn't figure out what Rico was planning, and he immediately snatched up the bundle of grass. He was sure the young Duchess knew about it, so that's why she gave him the miraculous plant. A few seconds later, he tossed the grass away. His wound was gone, no scar left. Only the royal family knows about this, and Ms. Rubenstein will face punishment if she starts trading in it. Calming down a bit, Lilith asked him to use it carefully so no one noticed. Then she turned to leave. But Rico stopped her. He stood in silence for a few more moments, then braced himself to take off his mask. Lilith immediately covered her eyes, knowing that if she saw the secret organization's leader's face, she'd be in trouble. Seeing her fear, Rico asked her to just look at him, but the girl wanted proof he wouldn't kill her. He reminded them he never broke deals and always paid in full. The moment Lilith saw his handsome face with black hair, Rico declared their deal was sealed. Later, Rico went to visit his sick sister, but the girl from the restaurant started yelling at him. She didn't think it was right he revealed his face, and she was curious about those kids. Rico only asked her to relay information about Onyx's illegitimate child to Duke Rubenstein. The redhead didn't get why he was acting like this. His sister wouldn't even recognize him now. The Duke probably had some scheme going, and he put on a little performance for the girl, while his sister was suffering from the magic. Rico only asked her to consider her request, and repeated that he needed to pass the information to the Duke. Also, 1 dose of antidote wasn't enough. He'd need more. When they met, Lilith asked him to trust her. Rico didn't know why she needed it, but she'd give him the antidote, so he could make that concession. He decided to trust her once, even though he didn't know where it might lead. But he'd been waiting a long time for a savior like her. Lilith, back home, was relieved she'd found Rico. He'd promised to reach out through a guild member. It could be one of the staff, and it'd be good if Rick's guy served her. But she'd already grown close to Jetty and June, who just happened to show up in her room. Noticing the kid was drawing, Jetty praised her artwork, thinking she'd drawn a jellyfish. Actually, Lilith was drawing her dad, and the maid immediately declared the portrait looked just like the Duke. Then she asked the kid to try drawing something too, and Lilith instantly handed her the pencils. For a while, Jetty sketched on paper, and in the end, she came up with a portrait of a girl. Really beautiful at that. The artwork really impressed Lilith, and both maids admitted it was their friend, Rachel. Rachel works as a maid in another estate too, just like them, and she's also a descendant of Onyx. Lilith was now more than curious. She didn't get what the Marquis of Onyx had to do with this. A bunch of thoughts instantly ran through her head, and she started guessing who that girl might be. A week had passed since the Duke's return, and 7 days ago they met a boy. Everyone treated him like low rank, but the Duke felt uneasy around him, and now he'd received an anonymous letter saying that boy was the illegitimate son of Onyx. Enoch couldn't believe it, but if that kid was really being treated terribly, they needed to find him fast. The Duke couldn't figure out why that kid was from this exact family he hadn't kept relations with, but now he needed to find a way to visit these people as soon as possible. When Enoch finished reading the letter, his daughter came to him, and he realized her lessons were already over. The girl said she really liked the first class when the teacher talked about famous sculptors and their art. Then she opened a picture in the book and showed her dad the sculpture by Lyndall called The Gates of Paradise. She wanted to see it in person, and the Duke promised to take her to the museum. But that piece isn't in the museum. The teacher said the Onyx Marquis family bought the sculpture. Turns out the artwork is at their place, but the Duke cheered her up again by saying she'd still get to see it. He promised Lilith he'd organize the trip, and before long, they were already in the Marquis' estate courtyard. The Marquis greeted them, and the Duke explained his daughter wanted to see the artwork. Onyx readily agreed and introduced the guests to his wife and son, Jonathan. The Marchioness greeted the guests first, then the younger Marquis, both being very polite. But Lilith immediately recognized the boy as a villain, yet kept her emotions in check. She just greeted him politely, even shook his hand, even though it made her queasy. Her forced politeness even fooled her dad into thinking it was genuine. The adults noticed the kids hit it off, making Jonathan blush. The Marchioness told her son to be nice to the lady since they'd see each other often, and who knows what the future holds. Listening to his mother, Jonathan offered to show Lilith the artwork. His dad bragged he'd taught the maids to behave properly. All the maids stood stiff and expressionless, but the girl marched right up to them to say hello. Jonathan tried to stop her, but she wouldn't listen. Just asked the maids to take care of her. The maids seemed to thaw and agreed to show the little guest around the gates of paradise. One of the maids grabbed the kid's hand and slipped her a key and a note. The note might hold the location of the room they need. Lilith walked into the art gallery with Jonathan, who'd just gotten some tips from his father. He needed to impress the Duke. Good connections were on the line. Pointing at one painting, the boy explained it came from the same era as Lyndall's work. But she didn't seem to hear him, bouncing around the room, taking everything in, driving him insane. If he'd known things would go this way, he wouldn't have been so polite. Now he was stuck babysitting this brat. Forcing himself to calm down, he took a deep breath. This girl could change his whole life. He led her into the next hall, only to realize she was already gone. Jonathan cursed under his breath. This kid was starting to really get under his skin. Lilith remembered the side door at the end of the third-floor gallery, and the secret passage beyond it. That's where the girl was headed, hoping to find Cheshire being held in the second level of the basement, in the next room over. At the same time, the boy was lying on a worn-out mat on the floor, shivering from feeling awful. He kept remembering how his mom had died, couldn't take it, and kept praying for himself to die. He wanted to be with his mom fast, and for a moment, he even thought her ghost had leaned over him. He even felt her touch and jumped up, barely catching his labored breath. Also, Cheshire remembered Jonathan's warning not to get near the Duke, and that no one was supposed to know about him. Now the boy felt like nothing could save him, and he was just fated to die. Then he remembered the girl from the alley, who had worried about his cuts and the warmth he'd felt from her. Cheshire suddenly decided to pray to God, asking for a little angel to pull him out of this hell. At that moment, the boy who'd given up all hope suddenly wanted to live. And just like magic, the door swung open, letting a beam of light into the dark room, and Cheshire saw the girl's silhouette. It was the girl he'd seen in the alley, the one who had promised to get him out of here. The boy recognized her, but couldn't understand how she'd gotten here, and thought he was just seeing things. Lilith stepped closer, and in the beam of light, she saw fresh bruises on his face. But that wasn't the main issue now, and they needed to escape as soon as possible. The girl knew she should have just gone for it and brought her dad. For Cheshire, every minute in this place was pure hell, and Lilith felt guilty. This whole week, her happiness was his personal hell. She instantly apologized, even though the kid had no idea what for. She didn't even know him. What shocked him more was she couldn't hold back and started crying like someone had hurt her. But after quickly wiping her tear, Lilith held out her hand and asked him to follow. Cheshire realized she wanted to get him out, but he needed to know who this little angel was. He couldn't believe a kid her size could get him out of this hell, so he straight up asked who she was. The girl gave her name, but Cheshire didn't want just her name, so she promised to tell him everything. But first, they had to get out of this dark place. She also assured him that if he followed her, his life would be way better than this. Cheshire still eyed the visitor with some doubt, still thinking maybe it was just his mind playing tricks. Still, he reached out to her, and she was glad this kid was finally finding peace. And when he grabbed her, Lilith was a bit surprised at how tight his grip was. Then she started persuading him to follow again, apologizing once more for arriving so late. She promised he'd never feel pain again, and those scumbags were about to learn a lesson. Cheshire slipped out of the closet and bolted up the stairs ahead of Lilith. Her tiny legs could barely keep up, and she was already begging her new friend to slow down. Upstairs, Cheshire peeked around the corner. No one in sight, but a couple of servants could show up any second. The girl wasn't scared. She knew if they got spotted, it wasn't a big deal. Just didn't want to get caught. They kept moving. She had to leave the key she'd used to open the closet, the one the maid gave her. It had to go on the second window in the extension hallway. She found the right window and tried to drop the key, but her tiny size made it impossible. Cheshire saw what she was doing, took the key, and set it on the windowsill himself. The girl grinned. They were on the same page now. Time to keep moving. Meanwhile, Jonathan was hunting for her, rallying servants to check outside. Then the young Marquis spotted her running with his half-brother, the one he hated most. What shocked him more? That idiot somehow got out, and Lilith, all innocent, declared she'd found a new friend. Jonathan was seething, ordering them back to their room. But the girl suggested a game of hide-and-seek instead. She shoved Cheshire, telling him to run, and the young Marquis barked at the servants to grab him immediately. The servants fell in line with the order and began chasing the fugitive, so Lilith had to come up with a way to stop them. But Jonathan immediately grabbed her by the collar and barked at her to stay put. Then he realized he messed up, released her, and more politely asked her to wait there. Yet she never intended to stay put. This was the perfect moment for her to try escaping. But the second she took a step, the young Marquise tripped her up. She instantly crashed face first onto the floor, jamming her chin painfully. Now she hated Jonathan for being so cruel to a kid. Cheshire heard her fall and froze, but the girl screamed at him to keep running anyway. He didn't listen at all and instead bolted backward, bypassing the servants chasing him. Jonathan gaped, baffled by what had come over the idiot, whose eyes now burned with rage. The young Marquise tried barking at him to get back to the storage room, but failed when he took a solid kick to the face. From the impact, he flew sideways, and Cheshire dropped to Lilith's side as she grumbled about how he ignored her. The boy said nothing, just grabbed her hand. And suddenly, something impossible happened. In a flash, they were outside, and Lilith realized he could teleport. As Jonathan screamed for them to catch those brats, they kept running, now on foot. Back in the original, all the cool powers went to the main heroes, while Cheshire had impact slow. Now she realized it wasn't teleportation. It was just that he could manipulate time. If he wanted, his opponent's movements would look like they were caught in slow motion. The girl was happy to have protectors like her dad and Cheshire now. Just a little mess left to sort out. Meanwhile, the Marquis was filling the Duke in on the rumors that had been floating around during his absence. He assured the Duke that any parent would understand why Enosh had taken the little lady 7 years ago. The Duke had his own thoughts. There wasn't a trace of another child in the house. He asked about the kids, and the Marquis admitted they'd never had many in the family. Onyx's reaction was exactly what Enosh expected. He realized he needed to start looking for that secret room. To do that, he asked to tour the exhibition hall, and the Marquis even agreed to be his guide. Just then, a burst of Lilith's excited voice came from behind the door. The Duke knew something was up. Both men headed to check it out. Jonathan's voice was in the mix too. Opening the door, they saw Lilith and Cheshire sprinting ahead, with the young Marquis chasing them full speed. The girl immediately turned to her father, pointing at the boy, and pretending maybe he'd been invited too. Onyx's face twisted with rage, but Enosh was curious. How had a 7-year-old kid tracked Cheshire down when he was supposed to be hidden? Lilith, being a regular kid, started bragging about how huge the house was with all its rooms, one of which is where she met her friend. But the Duke knew she was just faking it, and he was also worried about the kid's beaten-up look. He started grilling her, and the daughter admitted she found him in the basement. That room reeks and swarms with mice. The Marquis, clueless where to go, started scrambling to think of a way out of this mess. But nothing good came to mind, and he was barely holding back his rage that his prisoner was loose. Enoch, meanwhile, realized he was staring at an illegitimate kid Onyx had been hiding. The tension thickened, and the Duke ordered the Marquise to talk to him alone. They sent Lilith and Cheshire to wait in another room, and the girl trusted her dad would fix everything. She pulled out the ointment Resale had given her, along with the key and note. Then the little girl asked Cheshire to lower his head so she could slather the ointment on his cuts. But he refused. She reassured him it didn't hurt at all. She'd just rub some ointment on the bruise. And when he finally agreed, she thanked him for not ditching her, then asked why he had so many scars. He could have dodged, but the kid dragged out the answer. Then he said if he'd dodged, it'd just make them madder. He didn't have anywhere to run, so he had to tough out everything in this house just to avoid starving on the streets. This kid's just 11, and even with his talents, he's got no legal status. It's tough surviving here under these circumstances. Lilith apologized for saying something stupid. Out of nowhere, Cheeser brought up her dad. He'd heard from Jonathan the Marcus is plotting to ally with the Duke. The girl declared her dad would never touch that alliance with a 10-foot pole. He'd hit kids. This painting was just an excuse to get here. She also admitted her real target wasn't the art. It was Cheeser. She proudly said she'd come to save him. Then Richel told her he was in the building. Hearing that, the kid lost it. "Why'd you even look for me if you don't know who I am?" Lilith snapped back. "Why are you being so stubborn?" She reminded him they'd already met. "You're faking not knowing me." She'd been thinking about him nonstop. "I want to see you, and I don't need a reason to care." Smiling sweetly, the young Duchess admitted, "I just like you, okay?" Cheesier just deadpanned. "You think I'm some toy to you? He'll feed you and put you up here," he said. That made Lilith furious. "I was being honest," she shouted. "Why's he so skeptical?" "You can't treat a person like a toy," she scolded. "You're being ridiculous." Putting her hand on her heart, the young lady declared she wanted to be his real friend. But Chester still didn't buy it. She was the Duke's daughter. They just couldn't be friends. They bickered a bit for a while, and Lilith kept trying to convince him she was right. That's when Enoch Rubenstein approached and immediately spoke to his daughter. The girl lit up and rushed to him, while the Duke and Chester exchanged a sharp glance. Then Enoch suggested heading home. Not just him and Lilith, but Chester too. Back at the estate, the Duke told them to wait in the hallway while he needed to talk to his grandfather first. He also told the kids to sit quietly and not tell anyone anything, no matter who asked. But before he could enter the study, they spotted the twin brothers passing by. Leo and Theo immediately started asking who the kid was, and Lilith introduced him as Chester. The Duke stepped in and explained he was his daughter's new friend, who would now be living with them. Leo immediately started asking about his family, and Enoch admitted he was common-born. At that moment, Chester felt awkward, like he was a painting everyone was staring at. The Duke then told everyone to stay quiet while he talked to his grandfather and reminded them not to say a word to anyone. That's when Leo noticed Lilith gently holding the boy's hand and felt something strange. Then Enoch left, and Leo grabbed his sister's hand, reminding her of her promise to go catch spiders with him today. The girl hesitated a bit. She wanted Chesir to come along too. That seemed to piss Leo off. They'd planned to catch spiders alone, just the two of them. Lilith didn't get why Leo was acting up today. Back when he met Chesir, they'd bonded. Now the tension in the air was thick and getting heavier by the second. But Theo stepped in, aiming to properly introduce himself. He held out his hand to the guest. Leo just scowled and muttered that the kid reeked, though Lilith didn't catch a thing. Chesir went ahead and started sniffing himself, trying not to draw attention. Just then the Duke showed up, having overheard the last bit. He offered the guest a bath. He told the twins to keep Lilith company and, grabbing Chesir by the wrist, led him toward the bathroom. Lilith turned to Leo, demanding to know what his deal was and why he kept staring at Chesir. She even gave him a piece of her mind. Sure, the kid might stink, but you don't just blurt it out like that. That's when she guessed Leo was acting up because of where Chesir came from. Leo stood his ground, claimed he was just stating the facts, and that Chesir still reeked. Theo cut in, realizing this kid's squabble was going nowhere good. Lilith explained that this had nothing to do with Cheshire, and that Leo treated everyone like this. But the girl wasn't having it, saying it was a terrible habit and demanding he stop acting like that toward their new friend. That just made Leo angrier, thinking their sister had taken the side of some lowborn dirtbag. He even accused her of lying. She'd said she was going to see a painting, yet she snuck the new friend home instead. Defending Cheshire, Lilith said he had nowhere else to go, and if Leo had a problem, he should just say so. Her brother didn't want to blow up at her, so he turned away, nervously crossing his arms over his chest. Then he just stormed out and refused to listen to whatever Lilith tried to explain. It was like he didn't even recognize his own brother, and the girl was baffled, not getting why everything had gone so sideways. The Duke recalled meeting the Marquis, who'd asked to handle things discreetly. If Cheshire got on the lady's nerves, or simply wasn't useful anymore, they needed to avoid any weird rumors. Onyx explained that their reputation meant everything and hoped Enosh got the point. Now he'd led Cheshire to the bath, and when the boy took off his clothes, the Duke nearly choked seeing the bruises all over him. Still, he kept quiet about the pain. Didn't want the kid scared. So he even hopped in the tub with him. Then he admitted he hadn't shared a bath with his daughter in a year. She'd gotten too big and self-conscious. For Cheshire, it was a little weird to hear they'd bathed together before. But hey, they're dad and daughter. The Duke decided to show some fatherly love and lathered up the kid's head with shampoo. Suddenly, the boy asked if it was true that the Duke had ordered his death. It shocked Enoch, and Cheshire admitted he knew everything and had survived only because of his daughter. He also saw how the nobility would take in other commoners, then throw them out and kill them. Lowering his swollen, bruised eyes, the boy said he wanted to ask the Duke something. Cheshire asked the Duke to give him some money, and when he grows up and gets a job, he'll leave and not be a bother to anyone. Enoch knew the kid had been practicing this speech for a while, even though he was only 11. Then he calmly explained to him that kids shouldn't have to work. He brought the kid here not for work, and definitely not to please his daughter. If Cheshire wanted to be set free, the Duke wouldn't hold him back. He just couldn't ignore what was happening. Knowing the boy still didn't trust him, Enoch said he could ask for anything he needed. Later, the Duke met with his father, who gave his approval after a short chat. Enoch found it strange that he agreed so easily after 7 years apart, and so many problems. He even got ready to convince Nordic, thinking he'd be against it. But Nordic reminded him the son would do it his own way anyway. The old man just didn't want pointless arguments, so he let the son handle it himself. He noticed Enoch's way more lenient now. Back then, he was always arguing. The old Duke had a hard time getting through to his son. He was always questioning everything. Finally grew up and started following the rules, but never really got how messed up the whole system was. He figured obeying his dad was just his duty, even though Nordic always felt guilty about it. Nordic did make him toe the line. And yeah, he regrets it now, knowing he shouldn't have. If he'd known it'd lead to 7 years of Enoch vanishing, he never would have pulled that. After the talk, Enoch actually thanked his dad for making that call. Because if he'd pushed harder, everything could have gone a different way. Just thinking about it gives him the creeps. If he'd gone head-to-head with the old man back then, there wouldn't be any kids at all. He's genuinely grateful. After Lilith was born, everything changed for him. Enoch finally realized life was worth living. And seeing his daughter every day, he knows exactly what happiness is. Now he's determined to build the best world for Lilith, even if he knows it won't be easy. Nordic gave him a pep talk and swore he wouldn't interfere, especially since he's got one foot in the grave. Nordic's letting his son do whatever he wants. Even if Enoch tears it all down, he won't say a word. For a moment, the office fell silent. Then the young Duke just burst out laughing. Meanwhile, Lilith was sketching with Cheshire, and her jaw dropped at how amazing his skills were. Not many people could just glance at a book and then draw a jellyfish this amazing. But the kid humbly said his skills weren't that big, which the girl still argued with. Then he got curious why Lilith didn't draw the jellyfish herself. She was the one who suggested it. Cheshire pointed out her drawing wasn't a jellyfish at all. It looked just like her dad. The girl was shocked. Everyone says it looks like a jellyfish, but her friend saw it differently. Now she could show the drawing to her dad, and Cheshire remembered the Duke's words about his daughter. Enosh thinks his daughter's super talented and admitted she's heading out for training soon. The Duke was still worried about sending her alone. If Cheshire went with her, he'd feel better. But the kid couldn't go with her. He had no status, and Enosh told him not to worry. He'll handle it, so the kid didn't need to stress, but he didn't get why the Duke was being so nice. But now he saw this high-status guy was just incredible. Only one explanation made sense. Enosh was being nice because of his daughter, Lilith. Then he asked Lilith if she liked her dad. It caught her off guard. He's her dad, he should automatically like him. Plus, he's super kind and caring. He'd win everyone over. Cheshire realized the question was pointless. Out of nowhere, the girl offers her friend a shot at becoming the Duke's son, and the kid's totally floored. She tells him his dad's a lousy parent. Just because someone gave you life doesn't mean they get to call themselves family. She's all confident her dad'll sign Cheshire into the family like it's nothing. But the kid turns his back, voice all heavy, and says he doesn't want no family. He pulls out a sketch he's been working on and asks the lady for the night off. Lilith doesn't push back, but she's thrown when he asks where the servants' quarters are. Turns out Cheshire was planning to crash there. His trauma runs deeper than it looked, but Lilith doesn't bring it up. Just leads him to her room and tucks him in beside her. She watches him for a while. Cheshire's out like a light, deep as the ocean, from what she can tell. She grabs a cloth to dab his bruises. hoping her touch won't wake him. The bruises fade right before her eyes. She's stunned, thinking maybe it's his hidden power. But his words stick with her. He said he doesn't need family, but she knows it's just bravado. Deep down, Chesir aches for a proper family. His mom left and his dad was a monster. She whispers to the sleeping Chesir that she's got a secret to share. Bends closer and drops it. He's the hero of this world. People always face tough times and push through. No matter how hard Chesir struggles, Lilith vowed to stick by him. Quietly but with quiet pride, the girl declared they'd become a family. After wrapping up this little mission, Lilith's eyelids drooped and she drifted off to sleep. She didn't see Chesir's eyes flutter open. He hadn't been asleep and had heard every word. The boy turned to her, eyes locked on her for a long moment, making sure she was the weird kid he thought she was. He was shocked she went out of her way to rescue the Marquis, a guy who meant nothing to her. Chesir figured it was just a rich kid's fancy, playing with the common folk. He felt like a toy that'd get tossed when it got boring. Had seen it happen way too many times before. But deep down, he was relieved he could finally lie down without that gnawing hunger, and didn't want to end up dead by his dad's hand. He was ready to ride the wave of this noble lady's momentary interest. At least, that's what he told himself. Chesir still couldn't wrap his head around why Lilith had said they were gonna be family. It was weird, and he wished she wouldn't be so damn kind if she was just gonna ditch him in the end. The kid didn't want to get hurt like that again. With those thoughts, he turned his back and passed out. A few minutes later, the door creaked open. The Duke came in to check on the kids, noticing Chesir was wide open. He walked over and tugged the blanket up, making sure both kids were tucked in. Enoch spotted a kid's drawing on the nightstand and realized the kid's got some serious drawing skills. Then he checked out what his daughter drew. Her masterpiece looked like a jellyfish to him. But when he looked closer, he realized she was trying to draw him. It could totally be him if he fixed the eyes and nose. Staring at the drawing for a minute, the dad had to admit, it was a pretty cute picture. Then the Duke leaned in, kissed her forehead, and whispered sweet dreams. The next day, Lilith headed to class. Oscar was there too. From the window, she saw her new friend sitting by the fountain outside. His face was all sad. Class was super boring. Even Oscar was yawning. The girl just wanted to play with Cheshire instead of studying. The mage suddenly realized it was boring too. But he showed up because he promised Lilith a special weekly lesson. The girl decided to ask him a question to kill the boredom and asked for an explanation. But Oscar didn't buy it. He's sure she already knows everything and's just asking to pass the time. Then he mentioned she's heading to the academy soon, even though most go at 9. When she told him her birthday's the 19th of May, the mage added, she's got less than a month. But that's not all. The kid also has to meet her mom, which shocked Lilith. Her dad always told her mom left when she was a kid. She never really wondered why her dad always kept quiet about the fact that she still had a mom. The original text only mentioned the daughter's death. There was no mention of her mother at all, so Lilith never thought about it. Then the tower owner mentioned that Lady Selene was really popular, and Lilith asked for more details. Oscar noticed how the kid reacted and realized this was her first time hearing about her mom, but he wasn't sure if he should say more. The girl was super curious and begged him again to tell her everything. So Oscar started by saying that Marquise Selene Ledendorf was a well-known mage, but retired 5 years back. Now she's doing research at the academy, but Lilith was shocked to learn her mom was a marquise, not a duchess. Oscar explained that after Enoch disappeared, she married Marquise Ledendorf. They had a son, and now Lilith got why she'd never met her mom. Oscar figured Selene hadn't really cared about her daughter, given how easy it was for her to start a new family. But Lilith said she wasn't upset at all, and understood her mom had a new life now. She's young and talented, so she can do what she thinks is right. The towerhead didn't argue that this woman was a top-tier mage from a solid family. Selene married a duke who had the most power back then. Love probably wasn't part of the deal, though Oscar himself thought it was pretty harsh, leaving a kid behind just because she didn't love her husband. Lilith kept thinking her mom had no idea where she was. Her dad snatched her away right after she was born. Oscar kept needling her. Selene's some hotshot young mage, yet all she did was quit her job and chill out at the academy. Then the towerhead snapped. It was this very woman who told the Emperor where Lilith and her dad were hiding. She did it in exchange for her resignation, and the Emperor promised not to send her son to the military. Oscar's point? The kid's mom sold her own daughter to ensure her son's safety. Lilith figured the whole mess was her mom's fault. Originally, she'd been kidnapped and shipped off to the academy. After her rank was confirmed, they locked her up. But since her mom works at the academy, she knew everything all along. And in the original, Selene watched it all from the sidelines, stayed quiet, and acted like she didn't see a thing. Now Lilith admitted the whole thing kind of floored her. Oscar told her, Once she gets to the academy, head straight for the magic tower. He promised to use his clout to get her sorted, but the girl decided staying home was better. Then the mage laid it out. Without this, Lilith'd end up on the battlefield, where even kids don't get a break. Young fighters go up against toothy monsters. But Lilith kept fighting to stay with her dad. But the tower head was shocked. Turns out the Duke's letting his daughter live it up. So Enosh wants his daughter living like a princess, not some battlefield pawn. The Duke didn't follow the Emperor's war orders. Enoch hated the idea of invasion. But now he's got a daughter, and that gives the Emperor a reason to scare him. Oscar said Lilith would be his weakness. He'd have to go around killing innocent people. The girl still had a shot at standing her ground, but she wanted to know what the tower leader's plan was. He's not the villain type, and he clearly doesn't like the Emperor. Something's off about it. The Duke originally begged him to join the rebellion, but he said no. When the rebels stormed the palace, the tower owner Oscar was right beside the Emperor. What's even weirder is he just stood there and watched the Emperor die. Lilith remembered how things were before she became the final villain. Back then, Cheshire tried to kill her on her dad's orders. Oscar was the only one who stopped him. The tower leader never fought dirty. He took Cheshire down until he was coughing blood. Lilith thought they were enemies because she took the villain's side. Still not sure why he helped her, Oscar noticed how deep in thought the little girl was and told her, "Stop frowning or you'll get wrinkles." Out of nowhere, the girl confessed she couldn't read the tower owner's mind. Oscar was shocked at first, but then he laughed his head off. That shocked Lilith. Then she straight up asked him why he was being so nice to her. The girl actually suspected he had something up his sleeve, especially since he blushed instantly. After a moment's hesitation, the man admitted he was really taken with the little girl. Lilith was stunned, but Oscar added that he really loved geniuses. He didn't get why it shocked her so much. She was just thrown off by what he said. He could be misread, even though there was a huge age gap between them. Lilith realized Oscar just loved teasing people, and now he was laughing until he hurt. Tears were streaming down his eyes. But then he noticed something through the window. The girl noticed the street too and saw the boys were fighting. Leo knocked Cheshire to the ground and started pummeling him with tiny fists, rage on his face. Realizing it was really bad, Lilith sprinted outside. Oscar was mulling over her words about the age gap. It was trivial to him. He saw her rushing in to break up the boys. He realized she was way more mature than her years and nailed her role perfectly. Lilith was already reaching the fighting boys and started shouting from a distance to stop. But Leo seemed to ignore her and kept bearing down on Cheshire. Only when his sister screamed again did he stop, releasing the kid with a final jab to the jaw. The girl ran to her friend instantly, fussing over him, worried he was hurt bad. She didn't get what was happening. He'd promised to never let anyone lay a hand on him. Now, with Leo involved, it felt like she'd broken her word, so she demanded answers from him. Her brother just glared at Cheshire like he was the worst enemy he had. Then he barked at Lilt to stay away from him, calling him a rotten kid. But she kept pressing, and Leo gritted his teeth, struggling to spit out a response. Then he snapped, telling her to stop hanging around Cheshire, and reminded her he hated arguments about commoners. Lilt thought she'd misheard. Anyone else might sneer at Cheshire, but not Leo. He's a pain on the outside, but a good brother who'd chew out anyone bullying Cheshire. The girl tried to figure out when it all went sideways. Maybe she rescued him too soon. But now she was disappointed in Leo, declaring she was a commoner too. She was born and lived like one, and without her noble title, no one would have talked to her. She had friends from the common folk, even mentioning Aunt Susan and Uncle Joe. They're commoners too, and Lilith misses them. She's not about to be friends just because they're nobles. Then the girl stepped up to Cheshire and proudly declared he was her friend. And Leo shouldn't be picking on him. The twin just kept grinding his teeth. If she wasn't his sister, he'd probably give her a scolding too. He just yelled, angry and jealous, that Lilith had grown closer to Cheshire than to him. Lilith realized now he was just being childish with jealousy. She wanted to explain everything, but she couldn't. Then she turned her head and said, "Leo used to like me, but I hate mean people more than anything." Leo was still shaking with anger, knowing what continuing the fight could lead to, so he just walked off not saying a word. Lilith turned back to Cheshire, asking where he was hurt, but he assured her everything was fine. Then the girl apologized. She'd brought him here and promised no one would touch him, but Cheshire told her not to apologize, saying Leo's actions were justified. The twin had misunderstood him when he showed up and asked if they were real friends. Cheshire's answer was a flat no. Lilith was more outraged than surprised when she heard it, but the boy believed he was telling the truth, that he was just a toy. He figured if he told Leo he was Lilith's friend, Leo would hate him, so he said it anyway. Now the kid's convinced his twin just misheard him, so he jumped him with fists. To Lilith, those words out of Cheshire's mouth were the worst curse imaginable. He even said he wanted to explain to Leo, but Leo wouldn't let him. Lilith was crushed. She thought it was all her fault. On the way out of the Onyx mansion, she stopped by a restaurant to grab a bite. There, Cheshire had promised the Duke he'd look after his daughter. He promised to feed her and tuck her in, but Enoch had no idea what that meant. And Lilith had even told her dad that if she couldn't hang out with this kid, she'd use him as a toy. But it was just a joke to take Cheshire's mind off his burden, and now she realized she'd messed up. Trying to fix things, the kid asked if he could say they were friends from now on. Lilith paused for a second, and he blushed a little, embarrassed for even suggesting it. But the little girl was thrilled. Smiling sweetly, she asked her friend to keep it up. Cheshire, still a bit flustered, just gave a quick nod. Later, Lilith walked up to Leo's room and overheard him explaining why he and Cheshire got into a fight. The kid didn't wait. She barged in and saw her brother and Aunt Ordia inside. Aunt Ordia got the hint. They needed to talk, so she left them be. She started by saying she knew why Leo socked her friend. It was because he called her a toy. Leo scowled and admitted it. Nobody just calls someone a toy. But then she clarified that Cheshire meant Leo was the toy, not the other way around. She confessed she called him a toy, just messing around, but figured she shouldn't have pulled that. She also explained Cheshire's fear, that Leo would hate him when he said they were friends. Makes sense, since the twin had been acting weird toward him lately, but Leo suddenly denied it. He admitted he was jealous. "You're closer to that kid than me." But he figured if she brought him home, he must have been into her, and Leo feared she loved Cheshire more than him. Lilith never saw it like that. She thought Leo just didn't like Cheshire because of his lousy background. Sitting next to her brother on the bed, she explained, "That kid's my friend. Leo, you're my family." But the twin kept scowling and turning away, not even wanting to look at her. She confessed she'd only ever had their dad and used to envy kids with brothers and sisters. But then she got a great brother who also totally digs spiders. Throwing her arms around Leo, Lilith declared, "I'm so happy now. I get to play with two brothers. Leo's part of my family. Even if I had 100 friends, you're always the most important." The twin perked up instantly, his anger melting away as he suggested they go play and grab some food. Still, he was curious who Lilith liked best, him, Cheshire, or Theo, and she reassured him he was the top choice. The girl was relieved the whole silly misunderstanding was sorted out, so she gave her little brother a tight hug. The next day, Leo called Cheshire over, then plopped himself on the throne like an emperor, his posture oozing regal confidence. But he also apologized to the kid for hitting him, explaining he'd misread the situation. He added that Lilith didn't make him do it. He just realized he had no right to be mad. Cheshire didn't see the issue. After all, he'd been the one talking nonsense. So Leo suggested moving on. He wanted to know if Cheshire had forgiven him for yesterday's stunt. The dark-haired kid assured him he wasn't upset, and Leo's face lit up with a big grin. Theo, lying in bed at the time, noted his brother was talking a bit oddly, but was really not a bad guy. Then he told Cheshire to make himself at home, and Cheshire caught on that the second twin was sick. Leo immediately declared that if Cheshire was staying, he'd have to get used to the vibe, and with huge pride, he announced that according to Lilith, he was her favorite. The dark-haired kid's face went all glum, like he'd just accepted defeat. Then Leo added that Lilith loved him even more than Theo, and the second twin's jaw dropped in shock. But Leo kept smirking proudly, telling his brother to go ask her himself if he didn't believe it. She thinks he's number one, and he hoped no one would argue with that. But then Theo asked who Lilith loved more, him or Cheshire. Even though Leo hadn't brought it up with her, Cheshire immediately agreed to take third place, which Theo thought was a really sweet move. To be sure, they needed to ask Lilith directly. She was currently bored out of her mind in class. Theo thought it was a great idea and started getting up from the bed, even though his head was still spinning. As soon as he stood up, the pain got worse. He even collapsed to the floor, really worrying his brother and his friend. Leo immediately bolted to get the servants to bring some medicine. Cheshire watched Theo's episode and knew he was in really bad shape. What's more, the pain spread further. Now the boy was struggling to breathe. Then he hit the floor and started shaking in a seizure, just like epileptics usually do. He kept grabbing his throat harder and harder, like he was trying to tear something out of it, ripping at his skin. Cheshire realized Theo could hurt himself and yanked his hands down, pinning them to the floor. Meanwhile, Lilith was strolling with her dad, who suddenly remembered her birthday was coming up soon. He wondered what she wanted for a gift. Enoch would buy her anything, and the girl got lost in thought. Then she mumbled that whatever she needed probably didn't exist in the world. Then she remembered the festival was coming up soon and asked Dad to go with her. The Duke recalled it was a kids' festival happening soon. At this festival, kids from noble families recite poetry and show off their horseback riding skills. Lilith probably meant a regular kids' fair with streets full of carnival booths and toys. Clowns and puppet shows too. It's basically kid heaven. Seeing Dad was thinking, Lilith begged him to pretend he hadn't heard. Grandpa would hate it. She quickly explained that if he went with her, everyone would recognize him and bow. Lilith was still nervous, so the Duke promised to pretend to be James Brown that day. "We'll sneak in, grab some eats, and I'll buy you any shoes you want." The girl beamed and kissed his cheek to thank him. Then came a blood-curdling scream as they passed the twins' room. The Duke realized Theo was in trouble and needed help fast, but didn't want his daughter to see it. But Lilith was already screaming for him to let her go, right now. Before he could figure out why, she slipped out of his arms and bolted for Theo's room. She yanked off the pendant holding the monster's core while running, and Enoch caught sight of it. He knew what was inside by the purple glow and got worried. It was dark magic. He didn't know how Lilith had it, but before he could ask, she was already sprinting into the room. Servants were wailing over the kid, trying anything to help, but nothing worked. The kid was screaming like a hot knife was cutting him. His whole body jerked in convulsions. His mom barely held back tears, begging him to hold on. It had to end soon. Lilith burst into the room, followed by a baffled, anxious Duke. Seeing how bad it was, the girl knew she had to act fast, before it was too late. Everyone in the room turned to her, begging the young lady to stay back. But she didn't listen. Ducking past people, she sprinted to her brother. He kept screaming, grabbing his sister's arms. His fingers dug in like a vice. Lilith winced but held on, praying he'd hold out. She believed she could fix this. A few seconds later, Theo's scream faded. His body started to relax. The kid's face wasn't twisted in agony anymore. He was coming back to normal. Then, he saw his sister holding his hand. Still confused why she was there. The servants couldn't believe their eyes. The kid was way better off than before. Theo just sat on the bed, and his mom bolted over, tears of joy in her eyes. But Leo was a bit baffled. He was wondering why his brother's fit had stopped so abruptly. Theo had no idea, and his mom didn't want to know either. All that mattered was her boy was fine. Meanwhile, Lilith sat off to the side, sensing something was off. Hugging her brother, she slipped the pendant around his neck. But everyone was too caught up in the celebration to notice the trinket, or care why the convulsions had suddenly stopped. Not even his own mother noticed something had shifted in her kid. Then the Duke stepped up to Theo, checking in on his condition. He'd been worried about the boy too. He was just as relieved to hear the pain was gone, and everything was back to normal. Enoch then turned to his sister, asking exactly when the fit had begun. She admitted it was 10 minutes ago. That seemed odd to the Duke. The boy's episodes usually dragged on for 3 to 4 hours. Lilith decided to put her dad's worries to rest. Turning to her little brother, she declared the fit stopped because she'd prayed for him. Theo figured the same, trying to give the stone back, but the girl clutched it tight in her brother's hand. She confessed she'd been terrified, but at least he was okay now. Enoch noticed the pendant and asked where she'd gotten it. Lilith admitted Theo had bought it for her. The boy flinched at his mom's voice, and Lilith remembered how pricey that thing was. She quickly told her aunt she'd really wanted that flashy thing and begged her not to scold Theo. Ordia vowed not to scold her son, and the Duke suggested bringing in a priest to examine the kid. He figured his seizure ended so quick because of this pendant, explaining it wasn't just jewelry, it was pure magic. The priest later said the clash was easier to handle because the kid's magic levels were up. The Duchess realized that if Theo wore this, he'd never have another seizure. Energy clashes depend on the balance between divine and magic power. Usually one side's got the upper hand. The magical energy from a monster's heart kicks his magic up, shutting down the clash. The old guy was worried this fix would actually work. Kid had suffered for years, and the priest confirmed it. But no one had any idea demon energy could hit him like that. The usual power balance will come back until they find a permanent fix. Better keep that pendant on. Priests had been scrambling against this chronic illness for ages. Now they had a shot at curing it. Remembering the Duke had summoned him, the priest asked how he knew about this treatment. Enoch didn't want his daughter dragged into this, called it a coincidence. He explained Lilith treated the pendant like a toy, and when she gave it to Theo, his condition improved. Then the priest decided it was God's will, and that God had heard the girl's prayers. But Enos looked at his daughter like he had a serious chat with her coming up. After a short while, Cherish decided to drop by to check on Theo. He was curious about this weird sickness. He wasn't part of their family, and he didn't know if they'd clue him in, so he lowered his hand and walked off without knocking. As he left, he didn't get why his usual kid was even dealing with problems like this. As soon as he took a few steps, the door opened, and Lilith and Leo called him over. His mom was there too. Leo realized Cherish had come to visit Theo, and the girl immediately said her little brother was resting. Lady Ordia took an interest in the dark-haired kid, realizing the Duke had brought him into the house. The Duchess heard from Leo that Cherish had helped Theo before the servants arrived and thanked him 1,000,000 times. Then she noticed the bruises on his face that hadn't fully faded yet and got worried, but the kid said everything was cool. The Duchess told the servants to help this kid and do whatever it took to get his wounds healed fast. But Cherish himself thought all the people in this mansion were just weird. Lilith remembered they had apple puree for dessert today and invited her aunt to join in. Ordia couldn't say no to this cute kid. She added that Cherish and Dad would be coming too. Suddenly, Leo yelped like he'd been scalded. Lilith hadn't mentioned his name, and she calmed him down, saying he was invited too. With those adorable kids around, Ordia suggested setting up the table outside. The weather was just too perfect to waste. Lilith was all over it. She hadn't had a meal outside in forever. The kid caught Cheshire's confused look instantly, but she just laughed, figuring this was his first time for a meal like this. Cheshire, though, was still clueless why she was so excited. He was nervous. His trembling hand said it all. Then Lilith grabbed his hand and dragged him to show off the dessert spot. 4 days later, the Duke's estate buzzed with a celebratory vibe. Lilith was over the moon they'd found a cure for Theo's lifelong illness. Now Uncle Anthracite, off chasing that foreign cure, could finally return to the capital. The kid knew it was all her doing, and she was proud as heck. When she and her brother were sprawled out on the soft green grass, he suddenly remembered her birthday was near. He asked what she wanted, but for Lilith, the best present was whatever made her brother smile. Leo kept an eye on them, feeling a little odd about how much time the two were spending together. Then he got curious where Cheshire had vanished to, and Cheshire popped up instantly, like he'd been waiting for the question. Lilith spotted the dark-haired boy immediately and sprinted over to greet him. She handed him a small canteen of water and praised him for his hard work today. The Duke decided to take Cherish under his wing so the kids could attend classes together. Only 2 lessons didn't match up. Lilith had special sessions with Oscar, while Cherish trained under her dad's sword lessons. If he started training now, he could become a sword master 2 years earlier. Lilith was thrilled. The girl asked Cherish to come closer, reminding them they had something planned for today. The boy was acting weirdly shy and suggested she go with the master instead, even though he'd promised earlier to go himself. Leo suddenly lost his cool because they were whispering about something and not telling him. Cherish's words especially bugged him. Lilith quickly told her brother to stop paying attention, but he kept pushing, still got no answer. After a while, the little girl and Cherish left with her dad, who had taken the form of James Brown. The boy kept getting antsy for a bit, even though the Duke promised today would be nothing but fun. They arrived at the fair, where the cheerful buzz of people could already be heard from a distance. Cherish had never seen anything like this before and started scanning the surroundings with wide eyes. Lilith noticed his look and realized he loved it, secretly happy for him in her head. In the original version, the Duke came here alone with Cherish. It was a super touching moment Lilith would never forget. Enoch and this kid never clicked, because after his daughter died, he turned ice cold. The Duke actually cared about Chester and clumsily tried to be a father to someone who'd never known parental love. And now Lilith was super glad they'd all managed to make it to the festival. She instantly thanked her dad for letting them have so much fun. Then she turned to Chester, hoping he was having a good time too, and he just nodded in reply. Suddenly, Lilith spotted a dark-haired man with red eyes approaching from a few paces away. He was flanked by a few soldiers, but the girl realized it was Uncle Action. This guy walked up to the Duke, disguised as James, and asked what he was doing there. Action was also the captain who'd come to the village to deliver the Emperor's message. Enoch spoke up, but a soldier immediately corrected him, reminding everyone they were dealing with a high-ranking official. Lilith decided to step in to ease the tension and greeted the captain in her sweetest little girl voice. The man just gave her a look, remembering how she'd shown off last time, but then told his soldier to back off, explaining that Mr. Brown was a friend. He got curious why he was strolling around so casually, like he wanted to tank his reputation even more. And Enoch found himself wondering why Action was here, and he explained he was on an investigation. There have been a bunch of reports about missing commoner kids lately, so the captain came to check things out himself. Lilith thought there was nothing more useless than crime reports for regular folks. The commoners' district is total lawlessness, and investigations only happen if nobles are involved. A noble using power to dig into cases in a rotten world like this? That's a miracle. The capital just asked the Duke to keep his reputation in check, reminding him the ceremony's in 2 days. Axion was about to leave, but Lilith suddenly stopped him. The girl didn't say a word, just took his hand and dropped a tiny candy into his palm. Then she explained it was a refreshing candy, and if you ate it, it'd give you a boost of energy. The man thanked her, and as he left, he thought about how simple yet kind her gesture was. The Duke and kids decided to keep going, wanting to enjoy the festival's perks. They saw a prize being drawn, Princess Lara's shoes, and everyone was invited to join. It's a relic from Princess Lara's adventure, a massive trend across the empire. Last year, Lilith really wanted a pair too, but they were way too pricey. The second prize was a bunny pajama set. The Duke offered to join in, but his daughter said she didn't like Princess Lara anymore. Still, the Duke thought it was a sign from above and headed to the stand anyway, even though Lilith tried to stop him. They were the last entrants, and the Duke introduced himself as James Brown. The contest host started jotting down their names on a paper, then spotted a kid standing nearby. He announced this event is for all the kids, and they can't leave Mr. Brown's boy behind. The rules are clear. Every kid gets in, and the mom's gotta lift and hold them too. Lilith realized her dad had to hold two at once and shot back, "That's not fair!" "But that's how it is," Chasir said, trying to explain the kid wasn't his son. The Duke scooped him up and plopped him and his daughter on his shoulders. The girl hoped everything would work out, until a giant shadow suddenly loomed over them. A massive guy approached, cradling a tiny girl in his arms. He noticed another dad had brought two kids and gave him a thumbs up for the competition. The Duke complimented his strong build, and the guy politely shook his hand. Lilith eyed his giant fist and knew one punch from that thing could turn anyone into a pancake. The first challenge began. Parents had to squat with kids on their shoulders until only 5 teams were left. That guy named Billy noticed Brown's solid stamina, figuring it was from his youth. The girl whispered encouraging words to her dad to help him win. When the second round started, they had to squat and stand. But the host cranked up the difficulty. Dads have to spin around 9 times before lifting their kid. Cheshire didn't get why it was necessary, and Lilith explained it was a matter of honor. No turning back now. The boy just sighed heavily, seeing the girl was even more determined than a duke. Meanwhile, Captain kept investigating, guessing someone was already planning a kidnapping amidst the festivities. In the past month, over 20 kids went missing, all with pale skin and sharp features. You could sell those kids to the nobility for a pretty price. The captain had a suspect's portrait. "Did this guy show up to anyone?" Akian asked his men. They had no good news for the captain, and just made awkward faces. He realized they were probably just taking bribes and ignoring the crimes. He then warned he'd punish those soldiers if they didn't catch the scum today. They'd face consequences, and the soldiers scattered immediately to do their jobs. Left alone, the captain folded the suspect's picture several times. He then realized he was still holding the candy Lilith gave him. He remembered her words. This refreshing candy boosts strength. Then, he noticed her complexion had improved since their last meeting. She used to look like a doll, even kind of like her dad. But now the captain was starting to get why people have kids. He imagined some creepy guy with a nasty scar on his face kidnapping the kid. For some reason, he compared it to the Duke who saw the gates of hell when his daughter was taken hostage. But Axion quickly told himself he was just getting old, since he started caring about weird stuff. After a while, the finalists were down to 2 fathers. The Duke naturally, and that big hulk of a guy. The host asked the audience to cheer them on, and everyone clapped. Hell, even Cheshire, lurking in the kids section. In the final round, the rules were super simple. 5 kids are hidden inside 5 boxes on stage. The host asks questions both the father and kid have to answer, and you've got to guess the box. The kids' voices are warped with a balloon, but the Duke was sure he'd win. Billy stepped up to him then, saying he wasn't just gonna let the win slip away. After all, his daughter knew all about him too. The remaining boxes held kids whose parents had already been eliminated, and the host moved to the first question. It asked for the dad's favorite food, which Enosh thought was a piece of cake. Each kid shouted out different dishes, even beer and mashed carrots. The big guy jumped in first, confident he knew the answer, and begged to open the box. He was given the green light, so he reached out with a giant hand toward one of the boxes, but the Duke cut him off right away. Billy didn't get what the holdup was, and figured this guy was just trying to block him. Enoch just asked to throw in another question. It'd be a shame to split this fast. He declared they were now partners, but the brute just laughed it off. He agreed to keep going, raised his hand, and called out to the host for another question. Meanwhile, the Duke seized the moment, leaned toward the box, and apologized to the princess, said he just didn't get the answer. Next question, how big is Dad's shoe size? Enoch knew this was going to be a bit trickier, but he trusted his girl to nail it. 2 said they didn't know. 1 guessed size 14. 2 others went with size 4. Billy's probably got a 14, and his daughter called it. The 4? That guy's already out. Enoch realized his little girl didn't even know his shoe size. Despite all those store runs they'd done together, Billy just laughed, demanded they open the box, and sprinted toward them. He popped the lid, and out came his grinning daughter, celebrating their win. The Duke lingered on the sidelines, watching the two of them celebrate, already believing the win was theirs. Now it was his turn to open a box, but he had to pick one of two, no second chances. Rubenstein decided to tap into his power, even clenching mana in his fist. As he began opening the box, he still decided everything had to be fair. He lifted the lid and saw a little boy inside, staring up at him with terrified eyes. Meanwhile, the host was beaming as he congratulated Billy and his daughter, the winners. Then Billy shook his opponent's hand, invited him to a nearby pub, and promised to buy him a beer. The Duke promised he'd stop by sometime, and with that, they parted ways. One closed box remained. Without opening it, Enoch asked how upset his daughter had gotten. But when he opened it, his surprise? Another stranger's kid was inside. The girl there immediately jumped out and sprinted to her mom, who'd come to pick her up. Then the Duke started opening the next box, convinced his little girl was definitely inside. But another surprise awaited. A stranger's child. Enoch had no idea what had gone wrong. Only the last box remained. Lilith had to be inside. The Duke reached for it, but before he could lift the lid, Cheshire sprinted over and yanked it open himself. Inside was some random kid. No Lilith. Looks like she'd never been there to begin with. Enoch caught up, grabbed the host by the arm, and started demanding where his daughter was. He said he didn't get it either, but the Duke was furious. His pride was crushed. The host yanked his hand back and stomped off, clearly annoyed. But before he could get far, the Duke grabbed him again. No nonsense. Enough jokes. Bring back my daughter. That guy just screamed the contestant lost the girl during the contest and called for the guards. Two burly guys ran over and braced for the fight. Enoch remembered his chat with the captain. Kids go missing all the time. People report it daily. Kids disappear so fast, the guards don't even see it happening. The guards? They've been useless for ages. The Duke left 7 years ago. The captain told him this town's gone rotten. Corruption everywhere. But just because they're powerless doesn't mean they should just take it. The Duke saw the place was just as bad and snapped. He was done with the guards. When the guards were down on the floor, groaning from their bruises, Enoch marched toward the host, face like thunder. Next second, he grabbed his collar like a ragdoll and yanked him off the ground. His voice was so full of rage, the poor sap's legs turned to jelly. "Where's my daughter?" the Duke barked. The host swore he knew nothing. Enoch had only one choice left. He pulled a magic trick, shifted into his real form. Right in front of the guy stood Rubenstein. His gut was churning with fear, clawing up his throat. He vowed to spill everything. Turns out, just as expected, the powerful Duke's daughter had been snatched and locked up like a hamster. They shoved her into a sack during the kidnapping, but all she cared about was whether Chess was okay. A stranger approached, voice rough as gravel. "Why ain't you even crying?" That scar-faced creep named Grek, the one the captain had a sketch of. He yanked out a dagger, ran his tongue along the edge, trying to pump her full of fear. Lilith played along, voice shaking. "I'm terrified. Please, just let me go." Grek spat. "No way. And if you try running, you'll never see home again. You're staying somewhere else. Don't fight it." "You'll thank me later," he said. "He's shipping you to a big house where they'll feed you, love you." Lilith knew the truth. He was a slave trader. This guy was definitely tangled up in Axion's case. If she'd been some nobody's brat, she'd still be stuck here. All she had to do was wait for her daddy. Then this bald, fat prick walked in. He was yanking Grek's chain. The captain was close by, and things were getting loud. The Duke was throwing a fit, but this bald guy didn't get why a big shot would sweat lowlifes. Grek suggested leaving the girl with Count Blyman. They'd get 10 million for her, but the bald guy thought it was better to lay low for now. He told his partner to head to the port where a boat's already waiting. Lilith realized they were about to send her overseas. Panicked, she started screaming for them to wait. The fat guy took notice of her. When he looked closer, he realized she was also really cute. He told Grek, "A girl like her shouldn't be killed. She'll go with me. We'll sell her overseas." Knowing she needed to buy time until her dad arrived, Lilith begged them to just let her go. She assured them it'd be better for them too, since her dad was coming soon. But then she wondered, what if she confessed she was the daughter of Duke Rubenstein? They probably wouldn't believe her, and even if they did, it wouldn't help. They've already shown their hand, so there's practically no chance of survival. After all, if they let her go, they'd doom themselves. No villain wants that. So to stay alive, these scumbags would have to kill the girl without hesitation. Noticing the kid had gone quiet, Grek demanded she tell him who her father was. He was curious himself now, and she declared, "He's some really scary guy, and when he shows up, you won't come out unscathed." The The bandits first looked at each other, then burst into laughter. But Lilith didn't find it funny at all. Deep down, she worried her dad might be late. But they started preparing to take her with them. The girl didn't know what to do. She was terrified. Just a kid and all. The Greek guy grabbed the cage. His partner told him to take the back door. Lilith begged again for them to stop, but no one was even listening. The bald guy heard a noise outside the door and went to check it out, thinking it was one of their guys. But standing there was Duke Rubenstein. The thug, caught off guard, asked what he wanted, but Enoch spotted another creep behind him, holding the cage, with his daughter inside. Lilith saw her dad and called out, hoping he'd spring her right away. She started bawling, tears of joy, tears of fear, scared but happy she'd finally be saved. The Greek guy just laughed. The kid had said her dad could scare anyone. The bald guy recognized the Duke and sneered. No way he was taking the girl. They wouldn't just hand her over. He had a dagger ready behind his back and asked why the dad didn't protect her in the first place. Lilith spotted the blade and immediately warned her dad to be careful. But Enoch was no stranger to this. He caught the thug's wrist mid-swing, knife and all. The fat guy didn't expect that. He froze in confusion for a heartbeat. The Duke yanked his arm around his back, nearly snapping it, and the bandit howled in agony. Then Enoch shoved him aside like a sack and braced to step into the dimly lit room. Lilith just watched her father move, amazed by his speed. She'd even stopped crying. The Greek braced to fight the unwelcome guest and hurled the cage to the floor, sending a jolt through Lilith's body. The bandit grumbled at the Duke, assuring him he couldn't take him, and pulled a dagger too. He boasted he'd still be living large, no matter the fuss. But the next second, Enoch was in front of him, yanking the weapon from his grip. Then he smashed the scumbag's wrists so hard, bones crunched instantly. With limp wrists dangling like strings, the bandit crumpled to the floor, screaming in agony. He couldn't believe it, how one hit could shatter both hands. The Duke wasted no time, grabbed the scumbag's throat and squeezed, not letting him utter a sound. Next, he slammed the scoundrel onto his back and pressed him into the floor. Lilith watched, part impressed by her father's moves, part terrified by his strength. She honestly felt a chill watching him crush the bandit's throat into the floor, like he aimed to flatten it. Enoch wanted to give him a few more jabs to the jaw, but no time to play around. He channeled mana into his hands, pressed his palm to the scumbag's forehead, and knocked him out cold. His only goal now was to free his beloved daughter, and he headed for the cage. The cage was locked, and it was going to take some work to get it open. So the Duke started apologizing to his daughter for letting it happen. To get her out faster, Enoch used magic again, and the lock snapped open in his hands. He flung open the door, arms ready to hug his terrified little girl. The girl sprinted to him, tears streaming down her face again, but this time from joy, because Dad saved her. She begged him to stop apologizing, but the Duke couldn't help it. He felt awful. Lilith started apologizing too, thinking she'd been wrong to ask him to check out that festival in the first place. But Enoch believed he and every adult was to blame for not giving kids a better life, and it broke his heart that they had to live in such a rotten world. Holding the kid and back in his James Brown guise, the Duke made his way to the captain. Cheshire had stuck with Axion all this time, and Lilith was relieved her friend was unharmed. But Enoch was a bit stunned to see him here. When the kid clashed with the host, he bolted off somewhere immediately. Turns out, the second he found out where to go, he rushed straight to the captain. The Duke admitted he'd been worried sick about the kid, being left alone like that, and he apologized. But Cheshire was already apologizing, guilt eating at him for not being able to help save Lilith. Enoch was caught off guard. Why did everyone suddenly feel guilty? Then he asked about that gang at Axion, and Axion said they'd already been caught. No need to worry. After saying goodbye to the captain, the Duke headed home, but ran into Billy and a bunch of bodies strewn around. More bandits, and Billy immediately asked if the girl was hurt. These scum made his skin crawl. He wanted to keep stomping on them non-stop. Enoch thanked him, raving again about those killer muscles. For the girl who's asleep, he said she was just worn out. She's been through hell. Billy was glad she's okay, but it gutted him that their kids still can't walk the streets without fear. Same problem nagged the Duke, but he had no idea how to fix it. Then Billy remembered something and pulled a pair of little shoes from his massive pocket, the same style as the contest prize. He wasn't sure about the size. He'd bought them with his prize money. The Duke actually chuckled. This gift would make his daughter smile. Billy reminded him to swing by the bar later. Enoch promised to drop by for a cold one. The news of the Duke's daughter being snatched reached the Emperor. His rage boiled over instantly. Enoch Rubenstein's daughter, his treasure they've been working on for 7 years straight. The servant reported that Axion's on the case, and all the involved were arrested and are waiting for punishment. But the Emperor objected and asked to pass along that these scoundrels are staying under the imperial family's watch. That surprised the servant, and His Majesty declared they need to give the scoundrels a proper lesson before they die. Plus, Axion can't even lay a finger on them if they're nobility. He ordered the servant to find every noble involved and punish them, but noticed the servant was surprised again, and explained that honest Mr. Rubenstein would appreciate this, and he's probably beyond furious about what's going on. The Emperor said he needs to follow him and show some real honesty. At the Duke's estate, Lilith woke up when the sun was already high and blazing bright in the room. She screamed in terror, shot up in bed, totally confused how she'd slept that long. Excited maids burst in, like they'd been waiting by the door for her to open her eyes. They were all over the place, happy she finally woke up, and started checking if she felt any pain. But she immediately asked where her dad was and what happened to Cheshire, hoping her friend wasn't hurt. Enoch was with her just recently, but had to step out, probably to handle the mess from yesterday. Cheshire's just fine. He stayed up all night by her side, couldn't sleep, so they had to practically carry him out and get him to rest. The girl let out a relieved breath, then immediately became curious about something else. Slightly worried, she asked if everyone knew what had happened, especially her grandfather. The maids hesitated, but told her not to worry, assuring her the great master didn't know yet. They only knew something had happened to the lady and what the boss had told them. They probably meant Rico. Then the maids offered Lilith a bath. She agreed, and also found out the boss had been worried when the miss went out to play yesterday. Kids had been disappearing. Now the child understood, but immediately reminded them it was a secret. Jetty apologized, but their job was to report every move the family made. Plus, their boss had assigned his own man, even though the kids were with the Duke. She wasn't saying he couldn't have saved her. It was just that unexpected things could happen. The girl declared her dad was an amazing swordsman and would definitely notice any pursuit. But Jun countered. Their man had followed the Duke the whole way and wasn't noticed at all. They even shook hands and exchanged a few words, but the master never suspected a thing. Lilith remembered the only person her dad had shaken hands with was that giant, and she couldn't believe it. Still, it was good that the giant was on Rico's side. Jun added they'd have stepped in if anything went wrong. Then, Lilith asked to pass along her huge thanks to the boss. After that, June clapped her hands and reminded the little miss it was time to get ready. Picking up the kid, the maid promised she'd be the most beautiful today. Soon Rico got a letter from Lilith with another dose of antidote attached. The girl asked about the guy who needed the medicine and hoped he was feeling better. She also said not to feel the need to reply. Just if everything was good, he could draw a circle on the letter. She also asked what he knew about Baron Joseph Lutman, who lived on the islands. She wanted to know where he was now. And in exchange, she'd give Rico some interesting info. Rico remembered that Baron was a big shot 2 years ago, a political genius with an aura of power and a knack for picking talented people. His political skills had proven themselves in politics. He was super smart. But he vanished 2 years ago, and Rico started thinking how to track him down. Then Billy walked in. Billy offered to drink, and the boss thanked him for the solid fight from yesterday. Billy was just happy. Finally, he could punish those scoundrels without a second thought. But he wondered if the Duke was specifically chosen. Rico had wanted to contact him himself and ordered the Hulk to protect the princess. Then the boss admitted the young lady gave him a hand with a few things. But he doesn't know which Duke since he hasn't met the guy. Billy said this guy's solid. Just by looking at him, you can tell he's a decent sort. Then added that the Duke coming back to the Rubensteins is nothing short of a divine revelation. The Red Hawk was hunting for someone who could spark a revolution in that rotting empire. But not just anyone could do it. Only the nobility could pull off a revolution. So they were zeroing in on the Rubensteins. Rico was totally floored when Princess Lilith showed up to his door, and even with a proposal. Now he was starting to see it as a blessing too. Billy warned it won't be easy. This Duke doesn't look greedy at all. And clearly, revolutions need muscle. Onyx's been out of the loop on politics for 7 years. His standing in politics is like a newborn. No connections, no clue what's going on. Need to work their magic fast to get Duke Rubenstein back on his feet. Rico suddenly set his cup down like it hit him. Lilith's been sniffing around Baron Lutman for some reason. The boss replayed everything in his head. Maybe this was exactly what Enoch needed. Still, no one knows what that girl's up to. But Rico's starting to think she's got it all figured out. Meanwhile, the maids were all over Lilith, prepping her up, fixing her hair. Jetty and June gasped when everything was ready. They couldn't believe it, so they asked the beauty to check out the mirror. The girl walked up to the giant mirror, saw her reflection, and just couldn't believe it was her. For a while, she stayed glued there, smug as hell. I mean, she was the main hero's daughter, right? As she preened, the maids kept gawking at her like they were under a spell. Then the little miss started laughing, and her giggles went viral. Soon the maids were praising her beauty nonstop. Lilith thought, hey, a little extra makeup could make me look older and way more stunning. She begged the maids to paint her lips red, but they insisted she was already super cute. Oh, and they warned her not to just slather on lipstick willy-nilly. Cosmetics ruin your skin, they said. Jetty glanced at the clock and realized, wow, we're way late. Theo still needs to be fetched. She snapped at the little missy to hold on, while a maid rushed to track down the boys. Ordaya had a tea party lined up today, with nobles from high-class families at her place. Their kids were invited too. Daughters, sons, you know. The aunt probably wants to set Lilith up with peers her age. Originally, the story didn't have any tea parties or fancy gatherings. Now, the girl felt like she was living in a real-life drama, not a book. She was Duke Rubenstein's daughter. She decided to carry herself with the pride of a noble family and make her mark in society. The maids had already left, and Lilith was waiting in the room when she glanced at the vanity again. Next thing she knew, she was standing in front of the tiny table, staring into the mirror, wondering what was missing. She reached for the lipstick, figuring she could wipe it off easily if she didn't like it. She began dusting powder on her cheeks and nose with a soft brush, but it didn't go so smoothly. In her past life, she'd been super busy and never touched makeup. She finally finished up, and to her surprise, it looked amazing. Now, she felt like she actually looked a little more grown up. Just then, Cheshire knocked at the door, asking for permission to enter, though he already knew she was up. When he walked in, he froze, like total shock mode, when he saw the little girl. There was way more makeup on her face than she'd thought, and she had no idea why Cheshire was just staring. The twins peeked in from the doorway, not getting why everyone else was hesitating, and then they saw her and froze too. She looked like a raccoon to them, and eventually, the maids came in to wipe it all off. Cheshire tried to cheer her up, insisting she looked way more beautiful without any makeup. He even admitted that, she didn't look half bad trying to do it herself, just to keep her from feeling too bad. But here's the catch. Cheshire's not one for lying. Whenever he does, he can't help but squint, and the original text mentioned that. Leo kept making fun, saying his little sis looked like a witch, while Theo stayed calm. Then he leaned into Lilith and told her she was the most beautiful today. But she was still pouting. Leo wasn't too keen on the tea party. He was more interested in catching a glimpse of Lady Ballerina. And besides, the weather was great. Right then, they spotted young Lady Ballerina walking toward them, with another guy by her side. Leo immediately bristled. She'd arrived way too quickly. But then an idea hit him. Grabbing his brother, Leo ordered him to switch earrings fast, the ones that told them apart. Theo grumbled a bit, but didn't argue back. The next second, they swapped jewelry. The moment young Lady Ballerina reached them, she wrapped her arms around Theo, thinking it was his brother. Lilith caught on to Leo's plan. Now it was impossible to tell them apart. Erica Ballerina was stunning, like a doll. At 12, she looked way older than her years. Suddenly, a pang of sadness hit the little girl. Beside Erica, she felt like a tiny kid. She also caught how Cheshire was staring at Erica, and figured he was smitten. The boy couldn't say for sure, but Lilith pressed on. Countess Erica was way out of her league. Then, in a somber tone, she reminded him how she'd been called a witch lately, though Cheshire never had. She so badly wanted to grow up faster. Knowing she couldn't, Lilith let out a heavy sigh. Cheshire suddenly wanted to say something to her, but quickly changed his mind, telling her to just ignore it. Erica walked up to her, and they exchanged warm greetings, even throwing in a few compliments. Lady Ballerina caught sight of Cheshire and asked who he was. She'd never met him before. Theo immediately explained that his uncle had taken the boy in, and he was the one watching over him. As Erica noticed that Leo was being unusually sweet today, she didn't know it wasn't really him. When Theo realized he'd messed up his act, he snapped, "I'm not nice at all," and called her a fool. He looked just like Leo now, so Erica was thrilled and went in for another hug. Lilith quickly realized the girl had a thing for bad boys, then caught another guy watching them weirdly. He said hello, and the real Leo muttered that no one was expecting him. The boy greeted Lilith and explained he was Damon from the Marquis Martini's family. The name rang a bell for her. She dug through her memory and suddenly remembered. He was just a minor character. Surprised the Duke's family had taken in a commoner, she thought the way he spoke was a bit low, but she still politely introduced herself. The guy suddenly asked if she knew the etiquette rules. After all, she'd been living among commoners for a while. Leo heard that and quietly cursed, but the young count picked it up and remarked that it didn't really sound like Theo. Then he declared these brothers were born noble, but knew absolutely nothing about etiquette rules. The Martin kid was satisfied with the news and started asking Cheshire about his family. Leo approached and told him to calm down, but he kept asking why the Duke needed this. He said the dark-haired kid was just a toy for this family, especially Lilith. But he thought Chassir got lucky and told him to work hard not to disappoint the Duke. The young Count then suggested they all get to know each other better over tea. Erica eagerly agreed and, still holding on to the fake Leo, dragged him along. Lilith grabbed Chassir's hand. There was no choice but to go to tea. As soon as they took a step, the young Count blocked their path, saying the commoner wouldn't join them. Commoners aren't nobles, and it'd be rude for him to sit with aristocrats. Real Leo immediately stepped in, demanding answers, hoping it was just a joke. He even tried to teach the brat a lesson the traditional way. But Chassir grabbed his arm. Leo didn't get why he did it. The kid insulted him. The brat deserved a lesson. But Chassir said he had to leave for class, and started saying goodbye. Chassir quickly turned the other way, ignoring Lilith's attempts to stop him. Then the girl glared at the little jerk, and for a second, she wanted to punch his face in. At the tea party spot, the table was practically bending under all the snacks. The young Count bragged for about 30 minutes about winning a trophy in last year's horseback riding competition. Then he asked the twins and Lilith if they'd be joining the next contests. But Leo said they'd head to the hunt, and the young Count mocked them again, saying he knew they were just scared. The other boys, explaining that Mr. Martin had no equal, said they wouldn't even try to beat him. A girl later asked if the princess would compete and in what category. The young Count rambled again about being the only winner, but he'd secretly want to see Lilith in the contest. Erica, watching the second twin, couldn't figure out what was wrong with Theo today. Meanwhile, Lilith refused to back down from the Count and decided to enter, but she'd play by her own rules. Many minor villains gritted their teeth at Martin's loss and vowed to join the contest with Cheshire. A while later, with the Duke in tow, Lilith and Cheshire reached the stables where the racehorses were kept. The boy still doubted if he could compete, but Enoch told him it'd all go perfectly. So little Cheshire promised to do his best not to let the Duke down. Rubenstein was confident he'd succeed too. Then they kept moving. Lilith remembered the novel's rule. Main characters never finish second, so she was sure Chassir, even if he'd never ridden a horse before, would still come out on top. These races were her chance to humble that upstart and spread rumors about her friend's raw skill. The Duke let his daughter pick a horse, and she went for a plain one, figuring Chassir should get the win. But when she stepped into the stable, there it was. A stunning white horse, all decked out in flowers. She was smitten. "Dad, I'm riding this one." A groom strolled over, caught sight of their competition gear, and shook his head. "That horse won't cut it for the races. This is Zephyr, the horse that creamed young Lord Martin in the last competition." She blinked. "Why's Zephyr here? Does he even have an owner now?" The groom sighed. "He got hurt in training. Yeah, he's mostly healed, but he's out for the races. Worse yet, they don't even sell racehorses after they're done. They just get rid of them." The final words hit Lilith like a gut punch. "They just send them to the slaughterhouse." She couldn't wrap her head around it. Why destroy something so beautiful when it didn't do anything wrong? Her dad shrugged. "We don't have a choice. A horse like this, it's just a money pit." Lilith's heart ached for Zephyr. She had to take him. No way she was chasing a win now. Seeing the way his daughter gave him those pleading eyes, the Duke caved in, declared to the stablemaster that they were taking the horse so his little one could learn to ride. The stablemaster shot back that the horse was still attached to its old master and wouldn't take orders from anyone else. They tried to take her, but the horse won't let anyone get near. It's way too risky for a young lady. But Lilith kept pushing, reminding him that the kids' competition had magic to prevent falls. And besides, she really loved the little horse. It broke her heart to think she'd die if they didn't take her. The father's heart couldn't resist his beloved daughter's pleas, so he agreed to take the beast. Then the Duke decided to lay out Cheshire's rules, stating that posture was everything in horseback riding. Keep your head and back straight, but don't get too stiff. As Enoch explained the details to the boy, Lilith was nervous, even though she believed he'd make it. Then the Duke told her to hang back for a second, while he kept Cheshire steady for the ride. She agreed, then glanced toward the fence where they'd brought Zephyr. The horse was still on edge, and a real pain to bring over here. Lilith told the horse not to worry. She wasn't planning to ride, and the competition didn't mean a thing to her. She didn't know if the horse understood. It just turned its head away, but she hoped it did. She knew Zephyra missed her old rider, which is why she wouldn't let anyone get close. The horse snorted in annoyance, like she understood the conversation. So Lilith decided she'd win Zephyra's trust in 2 weeks. Time until the competitions. Next day, the girls started dragging over carrots, hoping treats would help. But the next day, Zephyra still refused to eat, just turned her head in annoyance. By the 11th day, nothing had changed. The horse stubbornly refused to let anyone near. That same day, Lilith, who always showed up at the same time, was a bit late. She immediately started apologizing to the horse, explaining her lessons kept her late. Then she complained about how they made her study linear functions at 7. That's way too young. Time flew by, and the competition day was fast approaching. Cheshire was already riding strong, holding the saddle like he was born for it. During a training session, he noticed Lilith watching him. She looked sad but still cheered him on, saying he was doing great. Then the girl heard her dad's voice, asking why she was just sitting around. Her dad had a night ceremony today, but first he came to check on his little girl. The girl told him she's been watching Shasir make progress and that she's really happy for him. She just wished Zephyr would come to her already. It looks like he needs more time to get over his emotional wounds. The Duke told his daughter not to worry, assuring her the horse would figure it out on his own real soon. Just needed a little patience. After that, Lilith wanted to make sure her dad was heading to the Emperor. Today was the night ceremony after all. She also wanted to confirm her dad hadn't actually gone with the Emperor when he got sent off to war. The Tower Keeper mentioned it to her, and the Duke explained that if monsters attacked their lands, he'd have to fight them. But the little girl was talking about the other kind of war, the one where they take over other people's lands, where they loot villages and slaughter kids who can't defend themselves. Lilith hoped her dad would flat out refuse. Enoch was floored. He hadn't expected a kid to ask him something like that. She begged him to promise he'd say no to the Emperor if he was asked to join that war. For her, it was heartbreaking. Her little face was so full of sadness and pain, it tore the Duke up. Lilith didn't get why her dad wasn't saying anything, but then he snapped out of it and told her not to worry about it. Hearing that, she jumped into his arms, sobbing happy tears that he hadn't let her down. She swore everything was fine now, but the Duke didn't get what she meant. She explained she didn't want him going to war because of her. It made the Duke even more confused, but he just held his daughter tighter and promised again not to go to war or refuse the Emperor's orders. The next morning, Lilith went to Zephyr at dawn because she couldn't do it during the day. Her dad would be home then. The Duke headed to the Imperial Palace and stayed there until late at night. She also brought the horse some good medicine, like Rico had sent, and mixed it with warm water. Soaking a cloth in it, Lilith wanted to wrap the horse's leg, so she hoped it was still asleep. Approaching Zephyr carefully, she told her not to kick, assuring her it wouldn't hurt. Then applied a bandage. The family doctor said it was great medicine, but warned it didn't work on animals. She didn't know if it would help, but decided to try, cursing the hell out of Damon Martini. Still, she hoped Zephyr would feel better, and reminded her she wasn't doing this for the races. If the horse didn't want to run, that was fine. Cheshire would still win. As she spoke, Zephyr looked at her, her eyes clearly getting sad. The horse remembered how the young count had yelled at her to run faster. He wanted to win. He told her she was only valuable in races, so she had to win. Now, Lilith was telling her that being born just for riding was wrong. But Martin's words, that he'd found another horse because Zephyr was useless, hurt her. Lilith insisted you don't have to run to be someone's favorite pet or earn their love. The girl just wants the horse to feel better, for its leg to heal and the hurt in its heart to fade. Her voice slowed, and before she knew it, she'd dozed off, leaning against the horse's soft belly. After a while, Lilith jolted awake when she heard her grandfather's voice asking what she was doing there. Still half asleep, she realized she'd dozed off. But seeing the old Duke here was strange. Nordic loomed over her with a dead serious expression, and she panicked, afraid he'd yell at her. She wasn't supposed to be here, so she blurted out that she'd just come to feed the horse. Glancing at the white beast, Duke Rubenstein was stunned they'd brought such an animal to the competition. He'd heard rumors Zephyr couldn't even stand on its own, let alone race. The old man told her to choose another horse, but she refused, saying Zephyr's heart was broken. If she left it here, the horse would shut down completely, and she wasn't looking for a new one. Then she apologized, admitting she couldn't compete and bring home trophies. The old man was stunned. She'd never asked to win trophies, and he knew she'd never been on a horse. Seeing her sadder, he crouched down and gently touched her shoe. She blinked in confusion, then watched as Nordic strode to the fence and slipped into the enclosure with one of the horses. It was a brown thoroughbred, pretty calm, and the old man let it out. Then he put the little girl on it and got on himself to control the horse, and Lilith started figuring it out. For a while, they galloped across the meadow. Nordic wanted to show his granddaughter what horseback riding felt like. The little girl didn't think it'd be this awesome. Then they cantered up a hill where you could see the whole province. But then she remembered her grandfather was supposed to come back with her dad only the next day. He explained the noble's banquet was yesterday, and the ceremony's today, so there was no point staying there. He'd have wasted half a day just watching his son, who he already knows is reliable, so he came back. Nordic noticed his granddaughter was smiling. She was just happy to see Grandpa look happy. Lilith thought he was happy because her dad came back, but Grandpa admitted life was way calmer without Enoch. Lilith suddenly felt sad again, realizing they hadn't seen each other because of her. While they lived in Xenon, her dad missed them a lot. Her grandfather didn't get her words. Enoch messed things up himself and left specifically because of him. The girl got worried again. Her dad would have to go back to war, even though he doesn't want to kill innocent people. Lilith quickly assured her grandpa she was fine and just wanted him to convince his son not to go to war. Life doesn't always go the way you want. When you get something, you lose something else. Lilith's father never wanted to give up. In his youth, he wanted to destroy the class system, and Nordic had to stop him. Enoch had to learn to live by holding back his real self because he had to obey his parents. It's the same now. Lilith's dad is stuck always tossing his own beliefs aside. He put up with it all for his old man, and now he's swallowing it for his daughter. But for Lilith, he'll make the right call. Nordic feels awful that the kid has to deal with this mess, and even worse that he can't do a damn thing about it. The old man wouldn't stand for it if his granddaughter was in danger, and he's dead sure her dad feels that fire even more. Now all they can do is hope the world changes one day. Meanwhile, Duke Enoch Rubenstein was at the imperial palace, getting ready for the ceremony. Walking down the hall, he ran into a young woman, a blonde he knew like the back of his hand. Right before the ceremony, Enoch headed to the throne room where the emperor himself was waiting. His stride was steady, but his head was a hurricane of thoughts. When he reached His Majesty, the Duke gave him the full respect treatment. Nicholas von Pavilion returned the greeting, all formal-like, to the great swordmaster and his loyal vassal. The emperor was happy to see him again, all ready to throw himself into the empire's cause. Enoch jumped right in with an apology for the trouble he stirred up, but Nicholas wasn't about to waste time on old regrets. But he's hoping the Duke will someday pick up a sword for him, like a real knight should. Rubenstein couldn't argue with him and said everything would go as the great premier orders. After that, they went to the emperor's office, where he began questioning why Enoch didn't bring his daughter. His Majesty wanted to see the kid, but the Duke stayed quiet. Nicholas said he had no doubts about Lilith's abilities. She's got Rubenstein blood in her, and he's thrilled the Empire has a new talent ready to spill blood for the homeland. This started to get to Enoch, but he held back. The Emperor told him to come over to the big curtain. When he complied, the Emperor pulled aside a piece of silk hanging from the ceiling. Enoch was really impressed by what lay behind the cloth. There were several portraits and paintings on the wall, and all the faces were familiar to the Duke. He and the captain were depicted there, along with moments when they stood over covered bodies. Below were portraits of other people, but their faces were unfamiliar to Rubenstein. These folks gave their lives for the Empire, and the Emperor couldn't give them proper recognition. Nicholas said he felt the same pain, sending troops to certain death for the Empire's sake. But war is brutal, and out there, no one can promise the soldiers' survival. Then, His Majesty approached the map on the wall and said they couldn't afford to delay for the sake of the lands and people. Finally, Enoch decided to tell the Emperor what he thought, and the Emperor didn't mind listening. The Duke just got what His Majesty was hinting at and already had a response ready. Nicholas was probably going to ask to send Lilith off, but she's super fragile, like you could hurt her with just a glance. She's so precious you can't just stand by, and that only made the Duke more on edge. Then the Emperor declared that a little girl like her can't be sent to the battlefield. He wanted Lilith to have a peaceful childhood, and deep down, he wanted to help her out. Then, in a hushed but more threatening tone, His Majesty told the Duke he wasn't the only one. A bunch of parents would be howling about this unfairness. No one wants to send their kid to war, but the Rubensteins got the power to shield their girl, and if Duke Enoch took her spot, no one would dare argue, and that was a death sentence for him. They never saw eye to eye on war, but wars have always been, are now, and will be, and the Duke always said ruling a country was pointless. But Nicholas does it for the people. He wants a stronger empire so no one dares mess with them. Looks like he's preparing for an invasion, and His Majesty expected Enoch to make the right call. Nicholas said the Empire's changed a lot in the past few years, and so has the Duke. He's not just the Empire's vassal anymore, he's a dad raising a little girl. He figured winter was the best time to start, when everything calms down and the stench of blood gets buried under snow. Enoch said nothing and walked past the Emperor, heading for the exit. The Emperor didn't stop him, but knowing the Duke well, he just shouted after him that everything would be ready. A little later, Rubenstein met the captain, who was waiting for news on how everything went with the Emperor. From the Duke's short reply, he got the message. Then he reported that someone wanted to meet with him, but Enoch didn't want to see anyone right then, so Axion admitted it was Lady Celine. His insides jolted, but he forced himself to stay calm and asked what she wanted. The captain didn't know, but she probably wanted to talk about the daughter. After all, she had the right to see her. That felt odd to Enoch, He'd already heard that Selene had a new family. Still, if she wanted to see Lilith, he shouldn't stand in her way. There she stood, and the captain quietly said goodbye to Rubenstein and left. Selene spoke first, remembering how long it had been since they last met, then asked how he was. From his sharp question, she realized he was still as blunt as he'd always been. Then she apologized and admitted she'd reported to the Emperor about her. It meant nothing to the Duke. Even without her, Nicholas would have found him if needed. Selena also admitted she got a reward for the report. They let her resign and discharged her son from the army. Rubenstein knew all about it, but the lady still didn't want to end the conversation so soon. She asked why he came back. He could have found a way to run off again, couldn't he? Then she got curious how he was raising his daughter, and he mentioned her name is Lilith. She's a good, sweet kid. She's just a bit shorter than the other kids, but she'll grow soon. Probably because she's a picky eater. Now Selena realized her ex had actually changed. He didn't seem like it before. Enoch wanted to get rid of her fast and promised to set up a meeting with his daughter if she wanted to see the little one. He hadn't told the kid about her mom, but Selena said she didn't want to see her. Actually, she came to ask the Duke to keep not telling Lilith anything about her. The kid's enrolling soon at the academy, where Selena works. They'll definitely run into each other there. Enoch still didn't get why his ex-wife didn't want to see the kid. She already has a new family and a son, so Selena can't be the girl's mom. Her son's 5, and he's also studying at that academy. So if Lilith sees her and starts saying weird stuff, it might mess with her son's emotions. Selena apologized again. When kids come into the picture, people's hearts really do change. Enoch should understand this better than anyone. But the lady's willing to do anything for the kid. She asked for his forgiveness one last time, then turned and walked out. The Duke found the day exhausting, especially the talk with his ex. He was relieved when it was finally over. He went straight to check on his little girl when he got home. She was still up waiting for Daddy. He lay down next to her as she flipped through the book's pictures and decided to spill something. He didn't know how to start, but the girl told him to stop stringing it out and just spit it out. He asked if Lilith wanted to meet her mom. That caught her off guard. She knew her dad had seen her mom today, but asked why it was so sudden. They're in the capital, so it's natural for a daughter to be curious. But the kid hadn't asked about her. She figured her mom wanted to see her, but the kid wasn't thrilled about it. They'd come to the capital, and she knew her mom was around, but she didn't want to see her. It'd be awkward. Now the dad was confused. Before, the kid had asked where her mom was, but that was because she just found out she had both parents. Until now, she only had her dad. It'd be weird for her if her mom suddenly showed up. That's why the girl thinks she doesn't need to meet her. And honestly, she didn't really want to. Enoch decided not to push. Lilith has the right to avoid her mom, and even not know who she is. They called it a night. The girl drifted off, and the Duke kept watching her for a while. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, and the conversation with his ex-wife popped into his head. The kid's wish meant more to him. Hell, he figured maybe this was for the best. Turns out Lilith wasn't asleep. She had this gnawing doubt her dad's meeting went awful because of her. She pivoted and wrapped her arms around him so fast it caught the Duke off guard. She just blurted out she loves Dad more than anyone in the world. And Enoch matched her sentiment. She spilled her guts. She only needs him. All she wants is for them to live happily together. Later, Lilith got a message from Rico. Let her know the patient needing the antidote's doing better. She was stressing over his little sister. Didn't think he'd actually respond. Rico also dropped a hint the Baron's holed up in Duke Walterac's castle, stripped to his last shirt, and got a broken arm. But track him down at the casino near the castle. Rico also slipped her a quick tip. If she's handing that intel to her dad, better run it by Jetty first. Wished her luck in the horse races, and gave her dad a head start on the congratulations. Lilith handed the letter over to Jetty, asked her to yank the last line. Burn the rest. Maid got right on it. Then they got ready to write the letter to the Duke, and Lilith was thinking how best to start it. The greeting came out pretty bold and arrogant, like some delinquent had written it. Jetty wasn't sure that's how it should be written, but Lilith said it was spot on. When the letter was done, the kid loved it. Even more so because this maid could write in different handwritings. Lilith started putting the paper in the envelope, and Jetty asked if she could ask her something. She asked who the lady really was, figuring she was living a second life. The more she read the letter, the darker her suspicions got, and Lilith confirmed them. But she reminded the maid about the Red Falcon's first ironclad rule. The maid said you need to offer equal value for information, but Jetty couldn't come up with anything like that, so she realized she couldn't dig into the young lady's true nature. Meanwhile, the training was in full swing at the Rubenstein Estate's training grounds. Enoch watched the knights train, but his daughter's words kept replaying in his head. She needed her dad and wanted to be happy living with him alone. The kid had lived without a mother, and he thought being a good dad would be enough. But as a father, he couldn't give her everything. As she grew, he'd have to give even more, because she's a girl. Then Cheshire caught his eye, standing off to the side with a wooden sword, staring at the floor. Chewing motions made it look like he was eating something, so Enoch asked if he was okay. The kid snapped that it wasn't, and lunged his hand into his mouth, which terrified the Duke. Enoch couldn't figure out what Cheshire was doing. He'd even paled a little and tried to stop him, but Cheshire had already yanked his hand back, and it looked like he'd pulled something out of his mouth. The kid tossed it on the floor, and the startled Duke saw it was just a molar. Then it hit him, like a realization just dawned. This kid still had baby teeth. Enoch instantly remembered his daughter's first baby tooth, and figured hers would start falling soon, too. Turns out, Cheshire admitted, he'd always yanked out his own baby teeth like that. He'd been scared too, so the Duke praised his bravery and asked when it first happened. At 6, his bottom front tooth came out. Now almost all of them were gone, except the very back ones. The Duke felt a little better, until it hit him again. That first tooth had come out at 6, his daughter was almost 7 now. He headed to the library, hoping books would help. Enoch grew uneasy. Lilith hadn't lost any baby teeth yet, not even the brand new ones. Her physical development was oddly delayed, and the Duke started wondering why. He didn't breastfeed her and didn't introduce solid food for over 5 months. Plus, their lousy diet back in the village could have been part of the problem. It really got to the poor dad. He was so lost he started banging his head on the table. He kept thinking the baby food was too watery. Right then, the butler walked in and was shocked to catch his master like that. The Duke himself jumped. Raim had snuck in so quietly and suggested he give some kind of signal. But Raim said he'd been knocking so long, the door was almost broken, and he realized the master was off in La La Land. He got what was bugging the Duke and told him to leave it to the trained maids. The young master should be tending to his duties, so Raim set a box on his table. The box was full of stuff he needed to handle today, and the butler took the books with him. Enoch started rummaging through the box, but still dazed, he didn't even know where to begin. He barely had time for the kid as it was, and he couldn't figure why he was even dealing with this. His eyes drifted to the ceiling, then back to the box, and there he spotted a letter. The envelope had the seal of the one who tipped us off about Cheshire's location, and it looked pretty recent. It said the Duke's rejection of his own beliefs wasn't the only way to protect himself. The author didn't get why Enoch kept playing along with the Red Snake's tricks. This wasn't the future Rubenstein ever wanted. He's got to grow up. He's been obsessed with another world since he was a kid. This country has to change. It said only Enoch could do it, and to pull it off he needed to find Joseph Lutman. The guy's from the Walterac estate up north, and you'll find him at some reckless gambling hall. The author claimed it was the first step toward a massive revolution. Then the Duke just tossed the letter on the table, not getting what it really meant. He'd already gotten a letter like this before. Pulled it out of the drawer, and noticed the handwriting didn't match. Looks like the ghostwriter's hiding their face. But who's behind this and why? Enoch stuffed both letters into his desk drawer, eyes darting around to make sure no one was watching. This is a direct call to rebellion. If anyone catches wind of this, there'll be hell to pay. The Duke thought the person who wrote this was totally nuts. This kind of nonsense just doesn't happen. The imperial court was the symbol of absolute power, bestowed with divine ability by the exemplar. That power was strictly limited to the Pavilion royal family, passed down through the generations. So the empire declared itself divinely ordained. The emperor himself claimed his power came straight from the gods. Defying him would be suicide. His powers are seriously on par with godlike strength. And some nutcase actually has the guts to call for a rebellion. This guy's probably been keeping a close eye on Duke, who's clueless why this got written to him. He used to dream of personally beheading the emperor as a kid. But that was just kid stuff. He wanted it because he knew how strong he was. The emperor could brainwash anyone with powers on a whim. No effort needed. He's the one person with elite-level powers nobody can control. He was clinging to that dream as a kid, but honestly, he had no idea what he was talking about. You don't just overthrow a regime with brute force. You need a damn good reason. Duke's got no solid reason. And besides, any revolution needs buy-in from the upper crust. Most aristocrats are just profiting off the class system. They're happy as hell with the emperor. Rereading that letter, Enoch lost his damn mind. Almost yanked out his hair over the stress. Someone saying he doesn't know what he's talking about and still wants to start a damn riot. Duke crumpled the letter in a rage. Wished that jerk would just come out and say it to his face. Later, Lilith was walking around. Couldn't stop thinking if Dad had read the letter yet. She was chatting with Cheshire, but it felt like he wasn't listening at all, just eyeing the horse. The kid made sure he heard everything and even repeated what she'd said about her mom and how her dad would always be alone. The girl was surprised. Cheshire had barely looked her way, but he actually paid attention. He wondered if Lilith was really okay without her mom. If so, then there's nothing to worry about. Uncle Enoch'll decide for himself. He could meet someone, fall in love, then get married. Actually, Lilith got a bit uneasy after the conversation turned to her mom, because that makes their love story real, like how they keep living past the ending. But the original has zero romance, not even a hint. It's a bloody, revolutionary mess. The author made Enoch and Cheshire with no love, just revenge, injustice, and angry revolts. Without meaning to, the idea pushed into his head. Maybe Cheshire doesn't even need to get married. The girl thought it was weird and asked her friend if he even wanted a family. He assumed she was trying to stir it up again, pushing him to be the Duke's heir, and told her to stop. But Lilith meant something else. A family of his own making, his own family. She asked him to picture meeting someone, falling head over heels, then tying the knot. After that, they'd live a while, have kids. But Cheshire still wasn't getting her drift. The girl just told him to shut his eyes and picture it all coming true. He's got a picture waking up in the morning to the smell of something delicious cooking all over the house. His gorgeous wife is already calling him from the kitchen, asking him to change their adorable son's diaper. Next, Chester walks into the nursery, and there's his cute little son smiling up at him, looking just like him and his wife. He changes the diaper, hands the baby a bottle, and the kid looks up at him, grinning. The kid's so damn cute, you just want to hold him and rock him to sleep. Then his wife comes over. She wraps her arms around him, whispering how much she loves him while he's holding their baby. Then his wife invites him out for a picnic. Perfect weather that day. They find a sunny meadow, birds singing, a little stream babbling nearby. The baby, sitting on Chester's arm, keeps calling out "Daddy" every now and then. His wife sighs happily, breathing in the flowers from the meadow, then turns to him, tells him again how much she loves him, how happy she is with him, and how she wants to live like this forever with the whole family. Chester opens his eyes and notices Lilith imagining it all herself. She explains that's exactly the family she meant, and asks what he thinks. For a few seconds, the kid thinks it over. It doesn't sound too bad, actually. Still, the thought gives him a little nervous. Though if it does happen, it'd be pretty awesome. Meanwhile, Lilith hoped the author was watching how she was sparing no tears or effort to instill love in the main character. She took her friend's hands and, as if praying, asked him to love in this world. Chester didn't know what to say at that moment, but in Lilith's eyes, he saw she genuinely wanted this. Then, leaving him to think for a second, the girl walked over to the carrot basket. She muttered that horseback riding, studying, and swordplay were all super important too, but she believed love was key to their lives, and anyone who didn't know how beautiful it was, just plain unlucky. So she suggested her friend give it a shot, since it brought joy and happiness. Realizing Lilith wasn't letting up, Chester caved. Plus, he could see something good in it himself. It lit up Lilith so much she didn't notice right away that Zephyr started nibbling carrots from her hand. But then it hit her. Both she and Chester were stunned, since the horse had been refusing food all along. The animal stood there with a smug grin, shoving veggies into both cheeks. Lilith immediately started whining. Did her friend see this? She couldn't believe it herself, but it was real. Then Chester walked up to the horse and opened the gate. Lilith didn't get why he did that, but he told her to try petting the horse. Her whole body buzzed. This was such a big moment, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. She reached out and touched Zephyr's nose, and the horse stood perfectly calm. Meanwhile, Cheshire slung a saddle on her, encouraging his friend to try riding. Remembering her small frame, the girl realized she couldn't do it, so the boy offered her his knee. Lilith hesitated. She could get thrown after all, but hope lingered, and Cheshire was egging her on. She started scrambling onto his knee, gripping his shoulder to reach the saddle. With a struggle, she got her tiny body into the saddle. Zephyr remained perfectly calm. The girl couldn't believe it. This creature was finally trusting her, letting her ride. Cheshire gave her tips. Stay tight, don't hunch over, and took the reins himself. The horse took a few steps, and Lilith, filled with joy, wrapped her arms around its neck. Cheshire beamed and congratulated his friend for winning Zephyr's trust. The girl was so happy in that moment. Happier even than when eating her favorite dessert. The next day, the horse race was set to begin at Hart Hill. Crowds had gathered, competitors were lined up. Then Lilith and Zephyr stepped in. Only 7 competitors total, including her. But folks say when the winner's obvious, the crowd dwindles. Lilith didn't get what was so big about this Damon Martin. So many people had shown up. It was insane. When the Duke approached, the daughter asked him not to worry. She won't fall off the saddle. There's a stick spell keeping her on. All this will be in the newspapers. And the girl worried they'd make her dad look crazy. She still saddled up Zephyr and trained for 5 hours. But it didn't calm the Duke. He couldn't help worrying. Then she reminded him she wasn't aiming to win, especially since she hadn't trained on the obstacle course. She just wants to ride Zephyr calmly because she loves that horse. Enoch understood his daughter's admiration. He hadn't seen a horse as beautiful as Zephyr before. Then Lilith spotted Cheshire, ready for the competition on his bay horse. Her friend had dressed up. Now he looked like a real heartthrob. The guy was nervous about Lilith making it, but she assured him it'd all go as planned. She even promised Zephyr she wouldn't go for the win. If there was an obstacle, they'd just go around it. Winking, Lilith declared she was leaving the win for Cheshire. She was just here to have fun. At that moment, everyone turned their heads the same way. The big favorite had arrived. Lilith and Cheshire turned too, and a few choice curses ran through the girl's head. Damon Martin strode in proudly, smiling at the crowd like he was already handing them his victory. But then his eyes landed on Lilith, standing next to the white beauty. His expression changed in an instant. The kid was beyond furious, not getting why she's riding with Zephyr. Then he spotted another rider next to the black horse, and the crowd was raving about how stunning he looked. Damon lost it. This was his moment to be the center of attention, but now it looked like he was going to end up in the shadows for sure. Spotting the Duke, the kid gave a polite greeting, then introduced himself as the son of Count Martin. Enoch wished him luck, and he reacted with shock that Lilith was in the race too, riding a gorgeous horse at that. The girl gave him a proud nod, and with a smidgen of sarcasm, added that her horse's name was Zephyr. Damon recognized his old horse, but didn't get why it was with the Duke's daughter. Lilith explained she felt bad for Zephyr. The horse had been injured, so she took it. She added that the previous owner shipped it back to the stables since it got hurt. She also lied, saying she had no idea who the previous owner was, but called him a lousy human being, because he literally sent her to the slaughterhouse. The crowd nearby immediately burst into applause for the girl. That just made Damon even more furious. Realizing she'd just shoved that scoundrel into the dirt, Lilith wrapped her arms around the horse with pride. Zephyr itself seemed to get it, and the horse looked thrilled that the jerk had been put in his place. After that, Lilith checked the map again and told Zephyr to just take a leisurely stroll and enjoy the scenery. She pointed out a spot on the track where you could see a lake. They could stop there for the horse to drink. The main thing was, Lilith did her job. Everyone now thought Damon was an idiot, and victory was Cheshire's for sure. Soon, the announcer with a megaphone asked all participants to line up at the starting line. Judges are stationed at the start of each route, in case anyone wants to drop out. All the kids were ready, and they were told to start on signal. Lilith kept believing that Cheshire would wipe the floor with Martin, and she'd even enjoy watching it. Then the announcer readied the starting pistol, and after telling everyone to get set, pulled the trigger. At the shot, the participants spurred their horses, and they took off down the race course. But within seconds, Zephyr pulled ahead of everyone at such a speed that Lilith was glued to the saddle's pommel. If not for the fall prevention spell, she'd have already tumbled off, and now she was just screaming from fear and surprise. For a moment, she even let go of the reins, not understanding what was happening. But Zephyr kept charging down the path, even though the little girl had just asked for a leisurely stroll. Glancing back cautiously, the girl noticed the others were already out of sight. Plus, at that speed, she started getting a bit queasy. Grabbing the reins again, she braced for the worst. The horse seemed to sense the rider's state and abruptly came to a stop. Then Lilith realized Zephyr had slowed down. It was nothing but mutual understanding. Lilith immediately apologized. She hadn't known horses loved the speed, and that she needed more training herself. Even gripping the reins was a struggle, and she felt totally unworthy of a horse like Zephyr. A shadow zipped past her. Lilith instantly recognized it as Chestra's steed. Then she caught sight of his face, turned back for a quick glance at his partner. The girl just shouted after him, "Keep it up, you've got this!" Soon they hit Route B. The real obstacles started, and Lilith's nerves kicked in. But before she could even think she wasn't ready enough, Zephyr picked up speed and leapt over the barrier with ease. Looks like this horse memorized every route. Lilith's only job was staying on. She knew the horse went through hell to remember every twist like that. For a while, they tore across the green meadow. Lilith spotted the glittering lake in the distance. Then she heard someone barking at their horse to pick up the pace. Damon Martini's voice. He wasn't just talking, he was cursing the horse out, calling it a lazy joker messing around. Damon was screaming how the horse was practically crawling on a section with no obstacles. Lilith bristled. Glancing around to make sure no one was watching, she shot back, "You're nowhere near real nobility. Your mouth reeks of crap." Then she unleashed every swear word she remembered from her past life. Damon hadn't even heard half of them before. And she kept going. "You've got zero talent. Last year's win? Pure luck because of Zephyr." Lilith told him to forget about first place and Damon's face twisted with anger and fury. Catching up to the Duke's daughter, he tried to threaten her, but she knew he couldn't touch her. He claimed some horseback riding rookie was passing her anyway. He had no idea it was all planned. Lilith just plugged his mouth again and rode off, kicking up dust from Zephyr's hooves in his face. Now Damon was cursing the girl out, spurring his horse with all his might to catch up. He didn't just want to overtake her now. It was a matter of principle. The kid reached out, trying to grab her and throw her off the saddle. He used some magic, and the spell keeping her in the saddle suddenly stopped working. Lilith was genuinely scared she might end up splattered on the track. She hadn't realized just how smart Zephyr was. She stopped dead in her tracks right away. By physics, the girl naturally flew out of the saddle, and her whole life, past and present, flashed before her eyes. But then she felt her fall slow down, and she couldn't believe it was even possible. The horses kept charging forward as Lilith hit the road. It hurt a little, but what bugged her more was how the heck that even happened. And it bugged her even more that Damon was openly breaking the rules, even when he was all riled up. Breaking the rules is a ticket to disqualification and a surefire way to start a family feud. Fuming, Lilith headed straight to the judges to spill everything. Martini's was done for. After taking a few steps, the girl heard hoofbeats and spun around to see Zephyr nearby. She was thrilled the horse had returned and offered to go back to the judges together to rat out that idiot. They'd believe her. Only the two of them were on the track, and she couldn't break the sticky spell herself. As she thought it over, Zephyr trotted closer and nuzzled her in the hair. The girl caught on. Zephyr was pushing to keep the race going. The horse even nibbled her jacket. But the anti-fall spell was gone now, and Lilith was terrified. Then she caught the fire of victory in Zephyr's eyes and was stunned. She thought all the tough training and beatings would have killed her urge to race, but Zephyr was all in on the run. Lilith agreed, and the horse tossed her back into the saddle. The girl braced for the ride and wondered what the hell would happen next. Gripping the reins tight, Lilith vowed not to let go, or risk a faceplant. Without a second thought, Zephyr bolted ahead. They tore down the track, slicing through the air. Lilith swore they were faster than ever. Now this was the real deal, and the little girl was starting to enjoy it. Besides, if she relied on magic all the time, she'd never learn a thing. She caught up to Damon real quick. He was standing there cursing his horse for refusing to jump the obstacle. Watching the jerk abuse his horse, Lilith realized she'd go on strike too if she had such a lousy owner. Then Zephyr trotted up to the same barrier, but suddenly stopped right in front of it. The girl didn't get why the horse did it, until she figured it out. This was the perfect chance to give that jerk another piece of her mind, and she immediately remembered all the snarky comebacks. Lilith turned to Damon, squinted her eyes like she was about to wipe the floor with him. Smirking, she declared he was a total sore loser, and even if he cheated, he'd never win. Martin's face turned so red with rage it almost went purple. Meanwhile, Zephyr leapt over the barrier and sped ahead, basking in her rider's proud cheers. Lilith was thrilled she'd made another awesome friend, especially one as smart as Zephyr. Now, there was only the final straightaway left to tackle. As Lilith got lost in her thoughts, she didn't notice they'd already reached the finish line. But what really mattered was where the heck Cheshire was. He'd been way ahead ages ago. Then she spotted him, standing right there in front of the ribbon, just a few centimeters away, like he was waiting for something. Lilith's horse kept inching toward the ribbon, and the girl tried to figure out what it all meant. Maybe Cheshire finally decided to let his friend take first place. She knew it for sure when Zephyrka tore through the ribbon with her chest, and the first winner was announced. The crowd erupted in cheers. Lady Rubenstein had won. But she wasn't happy. She wanted something else entirely. Now she was certain. Cheshire had just been waiting for her to cross first. A magician rushed over to her, ready to remove the fall prevention spell. He pressed his hands to her and got confused. No magic was coming through. When the kid hopped off her horse, the hosts noticed she was a bit hurt. The magician was instantly swarmed with questions. Why didn't the spell work? The girl could have been seriously hurt. He had no clue what happened, and Lilith's terrified dad was already sprinting toward her. He rushed over to the kid, demanding an explanation, but mostly checking if his daughter was okay. When he realized she'd still fallen, he wanted to know how it happened and why the spell was gone. Before Lilith could answer, Enoch and Nordic shot the magician a death glare, like they were ready to rip his head off. Lilith then said the spell was working fine. It just got taken off midway. She spilled everything about how she rode the track with young Martin. He suddenly yanked the spell off her saddle. That's why she crashed. She said it didn't even hurt much. Damon showed up just then and heard her story. Knowing his life was over, one judge shouted it was a rules violation, but someone else said the kid just lost his head. Damon had already gotten off his horse, his whole body shaking from nerves. The judges and his family swarmed him, while Lilith was thrilled he finally cracked. She told her dad she's still shaky in the saddle without magic, so she fell and bruised herself. Her grandfather was grumbling angrily. He'd never let this slide. The girl caught up to the old duke, guessing his intent, and swore she was fine. Sore, but no big deal. Plus, she gets how the young master felt. Everyone was watching him, and he wanted to win. It sounded like Lilith was about to forgive him, and sure enough, Lilith begged him not to punish the kid for breaking the rules without even realizing. The crowd got loud about how the Rubenstein name was noble, but debated whether this was forgivable. Meanwhile, Lilith was thinking she already won, and now needed to milk it for all it was worth. She'd get the winner's trophy, and it'd boost her family's reputation too. She'll be remembered as the generous, noble aristocrat, something she never saw coming. The girl walks up to Damon, offers him her hand, and says the competition went great. He stares at her hand like it's a red-hot coal, and that hatred? Still written all over his face. Then he flinches like he's about to bolt, and the crowd thinks he's losing it because they took his trophy. Damon forces himself to shake her hand, and Lilith tells him to play fair next time. He quietly asks her for forgiveness, and right then she opens her arms, clearly about to hug him. She actually hugs him, and the crowd starts chanting that the Rubenstein heir needs to step up. The truth? Lilith hugged him to whisper in his ear just how crushed he was by the loss. Not long after, the papers run a story. The Capital's got a brand new youngest spring tournament champion. They commission a portrait of her and Chester, both standing with horses, and the boy gives a lesson on holding the reins. The artist absolutely loves the pose they strike with the horses. The emperor himself commissions the portrait. It's a huge honor. Lilith suggests they hold hands. The boy blushes but takes her hand anyway, and she feels the warmth in his grip. Plus, the day itself is warm. Spring is finally here. A copy of the portrait ends up in the Duke's estate, displayed as a prized artifact. Leo was even a little jealous. After all, he'd won the hunting tournament too, but no one had painted his portrait. Theo just asked his brother to stop comparing himself. They were holding boxes and showed them to Cheshire. The boys explained it was a dress and Princess Lara's tiara. Perfect birthday gifts for Lilith. It was in 3 days, and Leo had even made sure the dress was decorated with precious stones. The tiara was custom-made from real diamonds, because everything sold was fake. The boys decided to keep the gifts a secret until the party and hurried off to hide them. Cheshire stayed behind, thinking about the upcoming party for his friend. He realized he hadn't gotten her anything and rushed home to check how much cash he had. He got 1 silver coin for pocket money and currently had 4. That should cover a doll, but she already had a ton of them. Cheshire wanted to get her something she'd really want, but he doubted he had enough cash. The twins had gotten her a fancy Princess Laura collection. It wasn't cheap, but it was just the dress and tiara, so Cheshire started thinking what else might be in that collection. Maybe a magic wand. But he didn't think the princess had anything like that. He felt awful he couldn't pick a decent gift and headed to the commoners' district. He checked out about 20 shops and found a cute bunny-shaped wallet. The cheapest magic wand here costs 10 coins, even if it's got fake gems on it. But Cheshire really wanted to get Lilith something nice, so he decided to find a side job. That's when he saw a lottery offering a magic wand and a magical sword, and it wasn't too pricey. He had enough coins for 60 tries, so he decided to give it a shot, hoping for some luck. He walked up to the counter and, confident as ever, asked for 1 ticket first. Meanwhile, Captain Axion was thinking, sure, they'd caught the kidnappers, but something still felt off to him. Then he heard a kid buying another lottery ticket, only for it to be empty again. By now, Cheshire had just 1 attempt left. The seller reminded him as he handed over the ticket. Captain Axion got a closer look at the kid and realized it was the boy the Duke had brought to him. Axion didn't get it. He knew Enoch had his hands full with that girl, and now this kid was causing trouble too. Even though the young Duke was always considered a weird one, Cheshire was hitting rock bottom. Another empty ticket. The seller put on a show of sympathy, muttering that the kid just hadn't been lucky. Feeling defeated and coming up empty, Cheshire slumped his shoulders and turned back home. After a few steps, he nearly ran into a tall, dark-haired knight he instantly recognized. The moment the shopkeeper spotted Captain Axion, he started trembling, but still managed to greet him with a shaky blessing. Axion just raised an eyebrow. "What's a kid like you doing here? This place isn't safe for children." But Cheshire just shrugged. "I'm fine, thanks for worrying," he said, turning to leave. Axion watched him go, then froze. Something about that kid was definitely off. He grabbed Cheshire's wrist. "Wait!" he blurted out, then immediately let go. Cheshire stared at him, puzzled. "What do you want from me?" Axion scratched his head. Why had he done that? This kid was a complete stranger. Then he glanced at the storefront window. That thing the kid was eyeing. It was the same one Axion had failed to buy. Axion frowned. You're not here for Onyx toys, are you? Cheshire shook his head. Not even close. But Axion wasn't buying it. That idiot Duke only spends money on his own daughter, he muttered. Not this kid. Axion yanked Cheshire back toward the counter. You need this thing, right? The shopkeeper explained it was the legendary sword of Hero Louis. Cheshire just turned his face away. Axion was thrown for a loop. You're not even looking at the same thing. Why spend all your money on this? I need Princess Laura's magic wand, Cheshire whispered. Axion stared. That's the weirdest thing I've ever heard, he muttered. What's with the weird taste, kid? The vendor chimed in, agreeing even though he couldn't believe the kid actually spent cash over a stick. He explained how pacifiers kept dropping out, and now he was too embarrassed to face the buyer. Depressed, Cheshire didn't want to stick around and turned to leave. But the captain stopped him. He tossed a gold coin onto the counter, so sudden the vendor nearly fell out of his apron. Axion chucked the coin at the kid, who caught it midair without missing a beat. The captain told him not to think twice, and to just blow the cash on lottery tickets. Soon, Lilith got a notice about enrollment at the Empire's Gifted Kids Training Center. But it added a warning. If the recipient didn't show up by the deadline, it'd be considered a violation of military law. Sighing heavily, the Duke realized Cheshire would get the same letter. After all, he'd asked to enroll them together. So the Duke suggested pushing it off for a year or two, since mandatory enrollment wasn't until age 9. But Lilith unexpectedly shot back, saying she wanted to go herself. She wanted to use her powers ASAP. Otherwise, in a year or two, she'd still be the same age and stuck like that. She asked her dad not to worry, promising she'd handle everything. In truth, the kid's problem had nothing to do with that enrollment notice. It had been days since the Duke got that letter, but there was still no response. Lilith couldn't believe her dad just ignored it. She wrote that letter to ignite a revolution. Maybe he decided to become the Emperor's pawn, just to keep her safe. It scared her, but she had to trust her dad. He was the only one who could start that revolution. Then, Enoch told the little one he had to go, said he'd bring her a birthday present. But the trip was going to be a long one. He planned to head through the temple to the central region. Right then, Lilith realized he was probably meeting Joseph Lutman. So he hadn't ignored her letter after all. Dad admitted he wouldn't make it back in time, but swore he'd be there for her actual birthday. 3 days left until the party, and Lilith started panicking. Could he even find the Baron in time? In the original story, Joseph had already been on the Duke's side from the beginning, serving as his advisor. The book said Enoch had to go through hell to get him to come along. So if Enoch needed to track him down in 3 days, Lilith begged to tag along. She knew that Baron better than anyone. She claimed she wanted to choose the gift herself, and Dad admitted he had to stop by a friend's place too. Lilith didn't let up, pretending to be shocked to learn her dad even had friends. She started shouting that she needed to come too. She couldn't stand being alone without him. Plus, she was about to head to central training and was terrified she might never see him again. In the end, Lilith convinced him to go with her, disguised as James Brown, into the alleys of Walterac. The girl was thrilled they came together, but the place was so sketchy that kids weren't supposed to be there. Only now did Enoch clutch his head, realizing he'd lost his mind, giving in to his daughter's pleas and bringing her here. The whole area reeked of cigarette smoke, and the Duke used a touch of magic to keep it from hurting his little girl. Meanwhile, Lilith was mostly wondering why it took her dad a whole 3 months to persuade Joseph. Maybe that guy was just too hard to crack, but not a problem for the Duke with his skills. Approaching one of the buildings, Enoch asked if Joseph Lutman was there. The 2 guys at the door, supposedly guarding it, just exchanged a glance. In the end, the Duke and his daughter were just chased out, and now Lilith got why it took 3 months. The good Duke had never been to a place like this before, and the way things were, he couldn't just waltz in and meet Joseph. Lilith even suggested he ditch the disguise and just come out and say he was the Duke, which Enoch totally agreed with. But he had a reason for changing into James first, before meeting the so-called friend. Enoch figured if that friend found out who he really was, he wouldn't be happy, and talking would be tough. Rubenstein started brainstorming a way to fix this situation. Then Lilith remembered there was a casino where the doors are always open for anyone who wants to play. Lilith grinned and teased if her dad knew how to play poker. Looks like they've got a fun day ahead.